This is part 21 of A Wolf Amongst Lions by Kallypso. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoy, and subscribe for future stories. Please check the description for a full list of tags and the link to drop a kudos for the original author. With that out of the way, let's continue. Chapter 105, The Old Lion. Even when Jaime knew the ending, it did not make it any easier. The entire trial seemed a farce for the benefit of the public. If Daenerys could, she would have simply sentenced Tywin to die without the fanfare, but she had a reputation to uphold. Reputations? What a curse they really were. Jaime had a reputation as a kingslayer and an oathbreaker, which people used to throw in his face at every opportunity. No matter what he did or what he said, he knew that reputation would follow him, so he had embraced it, abandoning honor and playing the despicable man everyone expected him to be. Tyrion did the exact same thing. People called him a dwarf, an imp, a devious, lecherous, warped little man, and he had worn it all like armor, because that was his inescapable reputation from the time he was born. But good reputations seemed even more poisonous to Jaime. Those who wanted to appear righteous and just would do anything to keep from falling from people's esteem, and if they stayed long enough in the light, well, the books would consider them heroes long after they died. Robert Baratheon, who Jaime had watched smile at the sight of the dead children, was still considered a hero for years after. Even when he became useless from drinking and whoring, and plunged the kingdom into debt, the reputation of the hero of the rebellion followed him. And Ned Stark's good reputation got him killed, because everyone expected him to be honorable all of his life, his friends, his family, even his enemies, until eventually he could not be anything else. He made a foolish decision, because what was he without honor? One different choice and perhaps he could have returned to his family instead, but his reputation swallowed him up and lost him his head. Jaime's father had a reputation as well, one of ruthlessness but also strength. He was one who never flinched, never showed his weakness. Some people hated him for it and others looked to him as a leader, but who was to say what Tywin really felt beneath his mask? Fear, regret, sadness. When had the great lord of Casterly Rock ever shown any such weakness, even to his own children? His reputation demanded that he stay calm and composed. Even when the verdict was read to the court, he did not falter. Jaime did. He felt a shudder go through him and he looked instinctively to Tyrion as the voices of the court rose all around them. Tyrion wore a grim expression that may have been a mirror of Jaime's own. They both knew the ending. And still it knocked the breath from Jaime, even though he knew in his heart that his father was guilty, that his father had earned this. It was a consequence of that ruthless reputation. He knew that Tywin was not an innocent being charged for a crime he did not commit. But it didn't matter. He was still Jaime's father. He searched for Arya in the crowd then, not wanting to see her expression, but knowing he must none the less. But in the sea of people he did not find her. She was no longer standing beside her mother. Had she already left the hall? To go where, he wondered. It didn't matter, he supposed. His missing wife was a good enough excuse to get him out of that crowded hall and the many gazes which lingered on him. He caught his father's eyes for only a moment as the guards approached him. Then he tore his gaze away and hurried from the hall. Arya was not in their room, nor was she in the place they always sparred. He couldn't find her in the gardens or in the Tower of the Hand. It seemed to Jaime that she had disappeared, and that was potentially dangerous. On one hand, Jaime knew Arya was sensible enough to know that she couldn't fight this, not without causing devastating and far-reaching consequences. On the other hand, he knew how she could get sometimes when she was desperate, so he needed to find her, just in case. He asked Tyrion, but he said that he had not seen her since the trial. Robb Stark was the same. He had seen her leaving right after the verdict, but nothing else after that, and her mother could not help him either. I will look for her as well, Catelyn promised. Best that she's not alone now. In the end, however, it was Sansa Tyrell who guessed where Arya might be. It's only a hunch, she said, but I don't think she's in the Red Keep right now. When we were children and Arya got very upset, she used to run as far as she could and hide where no one could find her. She wasn't actually very good at hiding, though, not from family. How far do you think she's gone? Jaime asked. Not far, Sansa said, and I think I know where she ended up. Jaime would not have guessed that Arya came to this place, but the moment he arrived it made sense. He had been to the Sept of Baelor many times, for funerals, for weddings. He wasn't a particularly religious man, but it was impossible to avoid such things in King's Landing. The last time he had been there, was it for his own wedding? Yes, that was possible. That seemed like a very long time ago. Arya was not in the sept. She was sitting up on the statue of Baelor just outside, wrapped in a cloak that nearly obscured her face. She was a shadow amongst the falling snow, and if she was cold she did not show it. She was a statue herself against the icy winds. Most would not have recognized her, but Jaime knew her form like the back of his hand. He approached slowly, standing just beneath her beside the statue, wondering if he should speak, but there was nothing he could think to say. Instead we stood still and silent, waiting. "I've always avoided this place," Arya said at last in a soft voice. "All of the time I lived here, I avoided this place like the plague. I was only ever forced to come here for a few funerals and weddings, and when I did, I don't think I let myself focus on anything until I was inside the sept." She looked up from her hands, staring straight ahead at the steps. "But this was where I was when they brought him out. I was on this statue, watching it all." Jaime let out a long breath. Of course that was what brought her back here. She was tormenting herself with her own helplessness, punishing herself for not being able to do anything. Arya had never been content to sit and watch. She seemed to consider that the greatest possible sin. "I stayed here until Joffrey ordered Elyn Payne to bring him my father's head," Arya continued. "Then I climbed down and tried to push my way through the crowd." She smiled bitterly. "I don't know exactly what I meant to do. I had my little needle of a sword. Perhaps I thought I could kill them all and save him. I was a child then, a foolish child. It was lucky that a man named Yoren stood in my path and held me back, or else I might have been killed." She let out a shuddering breath. "I think that day will always be the worst in my life." "Then why come back here?" Jaime asked. "I don't know if we'll come back here again tomorrow," Arya said. "I needed to prepare myself for that possibility." Jaime took a step toward her. "Executions take place in many places, Arya. Not just here, it may be some other place." She nodded once. "And even if it isn't, you don't have to return here," Jaime said. "I think my father would understand." "It's not about what he would understand," Arya said. "People will look for me to be there. They will see it as weakness if I am not present." Jaime looked up at her, not sure exactly what to say. Yes, perhaps the lords would see it as weakness, but would that be so terrible? Was she not allowed to have one moment when she faltered? Of course not, because Arya was in the midst of building a reputation for herself as well. A reputation that walked a very fine line between her father and his, mercy and ruthlessness, respect and fear, wolf and lion. It would be a difficult reputation to uphold, and somewhere along the line, Jaime was sure it would eat her alive. It already was. And yet, what choice did she really have? "Well, there's no need to put on a show of strength until tomorrow," Jaime said at last, reaching out a hand to her. "So you have no need to sit out here in this cold." Arya looked down at him, glancing from his face to his hand. Then she accepted and let him help her down from the statue. She did not let go of his hand even once they were standing side by side. She clutched it tight in her own. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "He's your father. I should be a comfort to you, not the other way around." "I'm not comforting you," Jaime assured her. "I just think it's best not to tempt the winter. I know you have Stark blood, but still." "I would have been fine," she said. "No doubt," Jaime said, linking their arms and drawing her closer to him as they walked. "You can comfort me later if it makes you feel any better. Inside of the Red Keep, though, I'm not as strong against the snows as you." Her mouth twitched into a small smile as he led her along. Daenerys had not said how Tywin would die, perhaps because she wanted to keep her options open. Tywin had a few predictions, of course. Beheading was the most common method of execution in the Seven Kingdoms. But then again, Daenerys did have dragons, and she had executed more than one soul with dragon fire. He supposed he would prefer beheading. At least he could keep his dignity through that. No man could stand strong against dragon fire, and then there would be only ashes to bury. He tapped a few fingers against the small table in his room. They had returned him to his so-called prison until dawn of the next day, leaving him rather alone with his thoughts. The trial had gone as expected. Varys had done exactly as he asked him. Now he would have a place on Daenerys' small council, but he would not only be whispering in her ear. "Give testimony against me, gain Daenerys' trust, and once you do, you will keep a close eye on her and send a few birds toward Arya if any concerning signs arise." Varys had accepted the task. In fact, he seemed rather intrigued by the arrangement, and now Arya would have eyes and ears in the small council besides Tyrion. It was an ideal contingency plan, especially if Tyrion ever found himself in a position where he had to watch his step. And of course, Varys had contacts all over the country. In most cases, Tywin would worry about Varys' loyalties, but his actions seemed in line with his claim of serving the realm. And if it was truly the people who mattered to him, then Arya was ideal for him to support. She concerned herself more with the affairs with small folk and seemed to care about their well-being. She cared about most innocents. It was not a trait that Tywin could boast, but it could serve her well in establishing control in the winter. Jaime, meanwhile, could easily gain favour with the nobles of the West as his eldest son, and Tyrion, with any luck, would keep control over the Crownlands. Tywin rubbed a hand over his face. He was still planning out the future right up until the end, but at this point he had done everything he could. The rest was up to his children, Tyrion, Jaime. Arya. He still was not afraid to die, even standing at the very end of his life. In fact, he preferred a clean death to exile at the Night's Watch. He could not imagine doing well there or living much longer. Better to end it now. It was an honourable gesture, of course, that Robb Stark had argued on his behalf. The young lord had told Tywin as much earlier that day. He had stopped him and his guards in the hall on the way back to his room. I offered it as a possibility, he had said. I said that you should be given a choice. Prince Oberyn did not agree and the Queen ultimately sided with him. Kind of you to try, Tywin said. It wasn't kindness, Robb said. Most men are given the choice. And, however difficult our past, we were allies in the most recent wars. I suppose it was what honour demanded then, Tywin said. Robb raised an eyebrow. You told me once that honour was idealistic nonsense. I did. I wasn't sure you remembered anything from that meeting other than wanting to tear my throat out. Oh, I remember that feeling distinctly, Robb said, but I remembered that little lesson of yours as well. Did it stick? Tywin asked. Not particularly, Robb said. I value honour a great deal more than you, I think. I just don't blindly cling to it or use it to ignore the truth. Well, that is a start. Tywin inclined his head. Best of luck with the North, Lord Stark. The young man had managed a quick nod before leaving him. It was amusing sometimes to see how Stark minds battled with the concept of honour. On one hand, Robb considered this trial justice the same as his father did. On the other, the Lannister armies had helped him to win the Northern Civil War. Which code of honour was one supposed to uphold then? Support of one's allies or support of justice? Still, Robb Stark had learned a great deal over the past several years. He was no longer the impulsive, cocky boy of the War of Five Kings. What raw talent he had for leadership had been refined. And House Stark, against all odds, would be House Lannister's strongest ally in the coming years. That was not something Tywin would have predicted 7 years ago. He would not have predicted being on anything but hostile terms with any of the Starks. But Robb Stark was not the only one who felt called to speak to him in the moments before his death. Tywin was surprised to receive a visit from Catelyn Stark shortly after the trial. Her expression was rather solemn, though he was sure it was not for him. For her daughter, of course, but not for him. Lady Catelyn, Tywin said, I somehow thought we had spoken for the last time a fortnight ago. As had I, Catelyn said, but there was something you said in the trial that I needed to ask you about. Tywin gave a wave of his hand. Ask then. Answering you won't make my current situation any worse. It was what you said about Robert, Catelyn said. At the very end, did he truly smile when he saw the dead children? Tywin raised an eyebrow. What reason would I have to lie about that detail? I'm not sure, Catelyn said, to make it seem as if the deaths of the children were inevitable. They were inevitable. I did not make them seem that way, Tywin said. And you already know that I was not trying to escape execution, so I had no reason to lie. Catelyn exhaled, sinking into a chair across from him. Then he did. What kind of man could bring himself to smile at such a sight? A man who hated all Targaryens and wanted them dead, Tywin said. Does that sour your good opinion of him? Catelyn brushed a few strands of hair away from her face. I never had a good opinion of him. He was friendly enough at first, but he spent most of his time drinking and openly consorting with other women, sometimes when his wife was in the room. Yes, Tywin recalled as much. Robert never dared to dishonour Cersei in such a way when Tywin was nearby, but he heard the stories from her. And Tywin was not often in the capital in those years. He never was a responsible man. Catelyn twisted a ring about her finger. No, not a drop of responsibility in him, but I understood why Ned was loyal to him because they grew up together. But if when he saw those children, she shook her head. My husband hated you for what happened to them and he was right to do so, but he went south for Robert. He died for Robert. I don't understand that at all, if what you say is true. Because no matter how Robert Baratheon reacted, he did not do the deed, Tywin said. Perhaps your husband pretended that his friend would have showed mercy, or maybe he forgot the smile in time. I don't know how he could, Catelyn murmured. He never should have come south to this rat's nest of a capital. This place was not built for men like him. No, it wasn't, Tywin said. I'm sure he would be pleased by the verdict today. You can take some comfort in that, I suppose. He would be pleased, Catelyn agreed, though the Dornish prince shouldn't have brought him into it, not when Arya was on the stand. Tywin recalled that moment well, the one instance in the entirety of the trial when he had almost dropped his calm expression. Oberyn Martell was called the Red Viper for a reason. Like any snake, he knew how to find weak spots and strike fast and hard. It was amazing that Arya had held together as well as she had. I knew that Prince Oberyn would find some time to bring the Honourable Lord Stark into the trial to prove his point. I have no issue with that, Catelyn said, just with him using it against my daughter. Believe me, I took issue with it as well, Tywin said. She held strong enough against it. She did, a picture of strength really. She glanced at him. You truly do not deserve her. He did not argue that point, because Catelyn Stark was quite right on that count. They lapsed into a long silence then, and Catelyn stood to go. She said she did not want to take up any more of his last hours. No need to worry about that, Tywin said. I doubt I'll have many visitors today. You don't have a reputation for making friends, Catelyn said. No, Tywin agreed. Watch out for her, Arya, and if she seems as if she is about to do something especially foolish, advise her not to. She doesn't listen to me any more than she listens to you, Catelyn said, but I will. Thank you, he said. Farewell, Catelyn. Her hand tightened just slightly on the handle of the door, but her expression remained impassive. Farewell, Tywin. It occurred to Tywin later that it was the first and only time that they had not used each other's titles, perhaps because they realized it did not matter any more. Tywin's next visitor surprised him as well, though not for the same reasons as Catelyn. This person he knew was fond of him, but he hadn't actually thought she would make it before he was executed. But when he looked up, Jenna was bursting into the room like she always did, her riding cloak still fastened to her shoulders. At least they didn't throw you into some dark cell, she said, surveying his quarters. I wouldn't have been able to visit you there, too cold. I wasn't sure you would reach King's Landing in time, Tywin said, still bewildered by her sudden appearance. Well, you didn't give me much notice, did you? Jenna said tersely. Kevin only a few moons in the dirt and you send me a letter saying you might soon be joining him. You two can't. She paused, turning away for a moment to wipe at something under her eye. You can't expect me to attend 2 funerals in such a short amount of time. Tywin exhaled. I did not mean for you to attend 2 funerals. Kevin was not supposed to die. It didn't surprise me when I heard, Jenna said. I always knew Kevin would die following you somewhere. That was the lot he chose in life. He didn't follow, Tywin thought grimly. He went ahead of me, before it happened. I always knew Tyget and Tyrion would go before us, Jenna said, packing about the room. Even though they were younger, they seemed the type to die earlier, but I had rather hoped I would go before you and Kevin. I'm not sure how I would go, choking perhaps or falling from my horse or some plague. She was agitated. She always twisted her fingers together when she was agitated, and she couldn't keep still. I thought, somehow, at the very least you would outlast me. Tywin moved into her path because her packing was beginning to agitate him as well, catching her arms to still her. Jenna, stop. Her jaw went taut and she glared up at him. You realize, don't you, that after tomorrow I'll be the last of our family, mother and father gone long ago and all of my brothers dead. It's selfish of you to leave me with that burden. Would you have rather have left me with it? Tywin raised an eyebrow. She laughed once, but the sound was pained. Well, you're used to it, Tywin, taking on the burdens of our family. You made it your job since you were a child, since father wouldn't do the job. Yes, she was right. Tywin had borne the burdens of the Lannister name since before he became a man, and now, for the first time in so many decades, he was about to pass them off to someone else. What a strange feeling it was. Don't worry, I'll look after the younger ones, Jaime and Tyrion, and all of Kevan's children too, Jenna murmured. The name will continue on like you wanted, and I won't waste a single tear on you or any of the dead. Good, Tywin said. I wouldn't deserve them. She looked up at him with a sort of exasperated look. Then she hugged him tight. He let her, resting a hand on top of her head. For all the years that had passed and for all the people they had lost, she was still his younger sister. He was glad she had made it before the end. Less than an hour later, Tywin received another visitor. This one had been expected. He recognized his second son's shadow at the door before he stepped into the dim lighting. It was a shadow that Tywin had so often resented over the years, stunted and misshapen, belonging to a child who killed his mother to come into the world, yet still, at the end of it all, his son. "That went as expected, I suppose," Tyrion said, "though I'm not sure if you planned for Varys." Tywin had planned for Varys, but he did not plan on telling Tyrion that. It was easier for one to hide a secret from their queen when one was blissfully unaware. It didn't matter either way. I agreed to face trial knowing that Daenerys would find me guilty. Tyrion nodded once, rubbing a hand behind his head. It was a long affair. "I've seen longer." "I'm not sure I could have sat through longer," Tyrion admitted. "You know, when you exiled me all of those years ago, I remember wanting to refuse the ship out of spite, demand you put me on trial anyway, but I'm glad I didn't because, well, I don't think I could have endured a trial like that, especially as Cersei was the one gathering the witnesses." He paced over to the table where a pitcher of wine sat. They had been kind enough to provide wine at least. Tywin watched him pour. "You didn't seem bothered by it, though maybe you were just hiding it well. Were you bothered?" "It varied from moment to moment," Tywin said. "Yes, I imagine it did." Tyrion crossed the room again, holding 2 cups of wine. He set one in front of his father. "One last drink then, not that we had many, but it's a special occasion." Tywin accepted the cup, taking a small sip. Tyrion finished the drink in one go. His son was nervous, just like Jenna had been, agitated, not knowing what to say, unable to keep still. Not one person knew exactly how to say goodbye. "Is your queen satisfied with the result?" Tywin asked. Tyrion laughed once. "I think she would have preferred it if you confessed." "Naturally," Tywin said, "but she must have known I wouldn't give her an easy time. The people would not have believed it." "I told her as much," Tyrion said. Tywin sipped at his wine again. "She did not ask you to play judge or witness." "She did," Tyrion said, lowering himself into the seat across from Tywin. "I just asked to abstain from it. Given I was only a child when it all happened, it didn't seem I had much to add to the proceedings." "Except for the fact that I told you what happened that night," Tywin said. "That I had indeed meant for my men to kill the children, if not so brutally. It seems that would have been a useful testimony to her." Tyrion drummed his fingers against his now empty cup. "It does seem that way, doesn't it?" "You didn't tell her," Tywin said. "It was a statement, not a question." "The people won't trust a hand who testifies against his father," Tyrion said. "I need to think about the future. I knew she would find you guilty regardless. There was no need." "That sounds reasonable enough," Tywin acknowledged. "Yes, I thought so too," Tyrion said, setting down his cup with a harsh clack against the table. "In any case, she allowed me to abstain and avoided complicating the whole matter." "Kind of her," Tywin said. "In any case, Varys said anything that you might have said. It would have been redundant." Tyrion nodded, fidgeting with the pin on his chest. Tywin recognized it. It was the one he had left in his office on his desk. "It's strange to be in the Tower of the Hand again. Do you remember when you sent me to manage Joffrey in your stead?" "Of course I remember," Tywin said. "It wasn't very long ago." "Feels like a lifetime," Tyrion said. "And now this feels the same, just more permanent." "Your queen seems a touch easier to manage than Joffrey," Tywin said. "And if she begins to show any dangerous signs, I assume you will keep a close eye on them and act as you feel necessary." "Yes, I will," Tyrion said. He sighed, rising to pour himself another cup of wine. "First time that I will be an official hand and not an acting hand. I have some rather large shoes to fill for someone so small. I think Lord Varys once told me that a small man can cast a very large shadow." He turned, a bitter smile on his face. "But then again, you always did blame me for being small." "I didn't," Tywin said, and at those words, Tyrion's bitter smile faltered into a look of confusion. "You could have fooled me, father." "I didn't blame you," Tywin said. "I hated you for it on occasion, but perhaps that was because I couldn't blame you for it. It would have been so much easier if I could." Tyrion seemed to shudder, looking away and drinking deeply again. There was a long silence between them, which was to be expected. They'd never been particularly good at talking to each other when they were not arguing. "Do you know how she plans to execute me?" Tywin asked. Tyrion shifted from foot to foot. "There are a variety of possible methods." Tywin raised an eyebrow. "Does one involve dragons?" "Yes, one involves dragons." Tyrion looked back at him. "I'll argue for beheading if I can. Cleaner and more likely to be accepted by Westeros nobility." "I'm sure Prince Oberyn would hope for a more painful method," Tywin said. "Of course he would," Tyrion said, "but he's not Daenerys' hand, I am." There was a hard note in his voice just then, a note of anger perhaps at Oberyn, anger for Tywin's fate. He knew perfectly well he didn't deserve that from his son, but Tywin inclined his head in acknowledgement. "Well," Tyrion finished his drink and set the cup back on the table, "I wouldn't want to take up any more of your time. I suppose I'll—" He trailed off as he moved toward the door. "I suppose it's best we say goodbye here." "Yes, that would be for the best," Tywin said. Tyrion nodded once, looking as if he had so much more to say but no idea how to say it. "Farewell then, father." "Farewell, Tyrion." His son slipped out the door soon afterward and Tywin heard it lock behind him. He leaned back in his seat, rubbing a hand over his face. It was strange to him that his son had any regret at all. He had expected Tyrion to be rather spiteful when he returned from across the narrow sea. He would not have been wrong to hate him. Tywin had exiled him for a crime he did not commit because it was convenient. But at the end of the day, Tyrion did not always do what Tywin expected. Another hour wore on, another hour alone with his thoughts, and then Tywin's eldest son came to the room and sat at the table across from him. They had not spoken since court, and even then they had only exchanged a few words. Their last real conversation had come the day before that, when Tywin told him his intentions for the future. He had expected Jaime to argue. Of course he had. Not one of his children ever went along with his plans without putting up some argument. But in these last moments, Tywin hoped not to argue any more. "So," Jaime said, "everything went exactly as you wanted." "Yes," Tywin said, "it did." "Well, at least someone is happy then," Jaime said. "You're one of maybe 3 people, Daenerys Targaryen, Oberyn Martell and you. What an interesting group." "I don't think Daenerys Targaryen is happy. She hoped for me to confess and make things easier," Tywin said, "and she'll be worried about her future relationship with House Lannister. Oberyn Martell, on the other hand, I do imagine he's quite happy." "He wouldn't be if he knew that you planned this whole arrangement," Jaime said. "I don't suppose Daenerys told him that." "I doubt it. Tyrion would have advised her not to, and she does seem to listen to him," Tywin said. Jaime nodded once, rubbing a hand across his stump. He had forgotten his golden hand, or perhaps he had intentionally neglected to wear it. "You never told me the full story of that day," Tywin said. "The day you killed the Mad King." Jaime shrugged. "It didn't seem important. Thousands of barrels of wildfire, hidden all across King's Landing, didn't seem important." "No, they did, but," Jaime shook his head, "I didn't want anyone to know about them. It seemed better that way. What if a new king came along and decided one day to follow in the Mad King's footsteps and set them alight? Only this time I wouldn't be there to stop it." "It's possible," Tywin said, "so why didn't you tell me?" Jaime sighed. I don't know. At the time it didn't seem to matter whether I told the truth or not. Everyone had already formed their opinions the moment they walked into the throne room and saw Aerys Targaryen's blood on my sword. What did it matter why I did it? He died. That was the end of it. He looked up at him. "In any case, you were rather angry with me at the time, and I avoid talking to you when you're angry." "Why did you think I was angry?" Tywin asked. "Because I became a Knight of the Kingsguard and surrendered my birthright for a king who would have burned down the world if he got the chance," Jaime said. "I know you were furious at me for that." "I was far more furious at Aerys," Tywin thought, "and myself. I should have told you the truth about him long before so that you would have known to refuse him. You were just a pawn in a game between us, a game that started before you were even born," Tywin said. "It is revenge when he named you Kingsguard." "I know that now," Jaime said. "He told me as much once. At the time I thought it had something to do with my skill with a sword. Foolish thought. In the end, being in the King's Guard wasn't much about skill, just about watching the king do terrible things and not having the power to stop any of them." He looked up at him. Was that what it was like as his hand? "I could manage some of his terrible things," Tywin said. "Not all of them." "I could not stop him from taking you from me," he thought. I could only barely stop him from going after your mother, and there was nothing I could do to save him from himself in the end. I saved a great many people that night when I drove a sword through his back, Jaime said. I saved strangers, I saved enemies, I saved you. But in the end I killed him for myself as much as the rest of you, because he was a monster and he terrified me. Yes, he was a monster, Tywin murmured, and I should have told you about him long before he named you to his Kingsguard, then you could have refused him. Would he have let me refuse him? Jaime asked. If he had retaliated, I would have found a way to kill him myself, Tywin said. I should have found a way, long before you stabbed him in the back. I should have ended him. Jaime shrugged. Dead is dead, it doesn't matter who did it. Tywin inclined his head, acknowledging the point. Do you know where he hid all of the wildfire? No, Jaime said. I can't begin to know, beneath major thoroughfares and landmarks, beneath the gates I expect. Hire men to search for them then, Tywin said, and move them. Daenerys Targaryen is not mad yet, but we will not take the risk. Jaime nodded once. I'll handle it, father, the wildfire and everything else. What is everything else? Tywin asked. Solidifying control over the West even after you're gone, Jaime said. Maintaining strong allies but making sure House Lannister is never reliant on them. And helping Arya adjust to her new role, of course. I'm exactly worried about her. You'll naturally have more loyalty from the Western Lords, Tywin said, since you're a Lannister by birth. Yes, Jaime said, but I'll insist that they recognize her authority as well. Good, Tywin said. They lapsed into silence for a while, as if they knew their last meeting was coming to an end, but did not know how else to drag it out. At last Jaime stood and Tywin stood with him. There was an uncertainty in his son, a fear. He did not think he could step into this role. It was a position he had been avoiding all of his life, and he had clearly hoped to avoid it just a little bit longer. You'll be fine, Tywin said at last. You're my son and heir, and I would not be leaving now if I did not think you were ready. Jaime nodded once. I'll try not to disappoint you then, father. Tywin reached out then, clasping the side of his face in one hand. You won't. He felt his son shudder slightly beneath his palm. Then Jaime managed a nod and a soft goodbye. Moments later he left the room and Tywin was alone again. He sighed and slowly returned to his seat. He tried not to think of what else he should have said to his son before he left. After all, Tywin had never made a habit of regret. It was the dead of night and Tywin did not sleep. There was no point to that, and besides, he was still waiting for one last visitor. Then in the hour of the wolf she came. The door creaked open one last time. Tywin looked up to see Arya slipping into the room. She had seemed to fill the room during the trial, so it was almost strange to see her then, looking very small. For a long moment she stood in front of the closed door, not saying a word. Then she glanced down to see Tywin's empty cup sitting beforehand. More wine, my lord, she asked, as if she was his cup-bearer all over again. His mouth twitched. Yes, pour yourself a cup as well. Chapter 106, The Last Farewell. Earlier that evening, Arya had gone to speak to Daenerys Targaryen, the new queen of the Seven Kingdoms. She found her in the Tower of the Hand with Tyrion, discussing some matter of the court. Arya did not really bother listening in before she entered the room. Whatever they were discussing was of little importance to her just then. Tyrion stood at once when he saw her, and Daenerys' brow furrowed. Arya was satisfied to see the slightest spark of nervousness in her violet eyes. Lady Arya, what brings you here? Tyrion asked. I would like to speak with the Queen, Arya said. Alone, if you don't mind. Daenerys and Tyrion glanced between each other, and Daenerys gave him a small nod. Tyrion sighed and paced around the desk to leave. As he passed Arya, he rested a hand on her arm. She was not sure if it was in comfort or warning, or both. Regardless, she gave him a small nod. When the door had closed, Daenerys turned fully to face her. I know what you've come here to ask, but it's impossible. I already passed the sentence. To revoke it would show indecision and weakness. I know, Arya said. I did not come to argue with your judgment, my queen. Her brow knit in confusion. Then, what does bring you here? You failed to mention how you would carry out the sentence, Arya said. I wondered if it was because you knew the court would react poorly to your chosen method. Daenerys hesitated. No, it was because I was undecided on the method. Good, Arya thought, then I will help you decide. Tyrion advised me that beheading may be the best course, Daenerys continued. Quick and clean. Prince Oberyn believes that showing the power of dragon fire will be a more effective lesson. I suppose I know which one you would choose. Arya could not imagine watching either option. There would be nothing left of Tywin after the dragon fire, and it seemed a painful way to go. And beheading, well, even thinking about it made bile rise up in her throat. It was not a poor way to die, but... Bring me his head. But even so... What did you promise the Dornish? Arya asked after a pause. Regarding the execution. I promised them that Tywin Lannister would face justice, Daenerys said. You did not promise a particular kind of death. No, we did not discuss it. Good, Arya said. Then you won't be breaking your promise if you give me leave to handle it instead. Handle it? Daenerys asked. I don't quite understand what you're suggesting. I'm not suggesting, I'm asking. Asking for your leave to give Lord Tywin some painless execution. He will be dead by dawn and you will not have to choose between those two methods. Why? Daenerys shook her head. And why would I give you permission to do that? Because I'm the hero of Harrenhal, Arya said. I killed the Night King and saved this kingdom for you to rule. I can help you keep the peace for many years because I have many friends throughout the major families and I know that peace is what is best for the kingdom. This is the only thing I am asking in return, your grace, this one thing, and you will have an ally in me. Daenerys hesitated, and that was how Arya knew that she had her, because the Dragon Queen knew she needed Arya for an ally if she was to keep the 7 kingdoms. Arya didn't have to threaten her. The threat was implied in the space in between her words. She had watched Daenerys fretting over how to obtain Arya's support ever since she arrived in Westeros, and here Arya was offering her such a simple thing in exchange for her loyalty. You won't break any vows or promises if you give me this, your grace, Arya said, pressing her advantage. You promised justice, and death is death no matter the method. Please, give me your leave. And if I do not, Daenerys asked. Then that is your decision, Arya said, but I hope that you will. I think it would be best for everyone if we were on good terms. I agree, Daenerys said, packing toward the windows. Arya watched her thumb and forefinger rub together nervously. If I allow you this, I have conditions. And what are those? Arya asked. That you do not resent me for the trial, Daenerys said. You must know that I could not let him live. I know, Arya said. What you said about him during the trial was not wrong. Daenerys turned back to face her. He was instrumental in my peaceful transition to the throne, and he kept his promises. I do suppose that a painless execution is payment enough for that. She was rationalizing her choice, though she likely knew this would upset Oberyn. It might even drive a wrench between her and the Dornish. But what did it matter when she seemed to be getting so many more allies in return? She had already promised to marry Quentyn Martell. She had their loyalty through marriage. It was the other houses she still needed to buy. So, Arya said, will you give me leave, your grace? Daenerys nodded. Yes, Lady Arya, I give you leave, so long as you continue to work to keep peace in the realm. On my honour as a Stark and a Lannister, Arya said, I swear that I will. It was never a question that she would work to maintain the peace, but that might not always mean serving Daenerys. It was a small thing, but it pleased Arya that she was not made to swear a vow she could not keep. That was what led Arya to Lord Tywin's room in the dead of night, clutching a small vial in her hand. It almost seemed to burn her skin as she pressed it against her palm. She was painfully aware of the contents of the vial. She had asked Daenerys for this, and yet the thought of actually giving this poison to Tywin. He will die either way, she thought. This way is better. More wines, my lord. Yes, pour yourself a cup as well. At his instruction, she slowly poured them both a full goblet. It was a familiar motion to her. She had poured him wine at Harrenhal and in his tent during the War of 5 Kings. On occasion, she had poured him wine in the Tower of the Hand during their lessons, but it struck her then that this was the last time. I'm not sure I was ever particularly good as a cupbearer, she said, hopping to fill the silence. It's surprising you kept me on long enough to find out who I was. For a highborn girl, you weren't terrible, Tywin said. You knew how to make yourself small and stay out of the way when you weren't needed, though you couldn't pass for lowborn any better than you could pass for being a boy. I fooled almost everyone, Arya said indignantly, turning away from the table, and you didn't know who I really was until Lord Baelish told you. Because at the time I thought you were still in King's Landing, Tywin said. No one had told me otherwise. Probably because they were afraid to tell you a 12-year-old girl escaped them. That is likely. For a moment, a silence fell between them again, and Arya lingered at the table, clutching both goblets of wine in her hand. Then she let out a shaky breath and paced over to where he sat. She uncorked the tiny vial and poured the contents into one of the cups. Then she slowly slid his across the table. He looked from the cup up to her and let out a long sigh as he realized what she was doing. Arya. It's all right, Arya said. I have permission from the Queen granted to me earlier this evening. She drew a letter from her belt. I had her put it in writing, just in case you doubted me. I don't doubt you. I would know if you were lying, Tywin said. Nonetheless, he took the letter from her and read it over a few times before setting it aside. How did you convince her? I reminded her of my current influence in the realm, Arya said, and asked for this small favor in return for helping to keep the peace. It almost sounds as if you threatened her, Tywin said. I didn't, Arya said. I made her a desirable offer. I didn't need to say much. She desperately wants me as an ally. Of course she does. She's not a fool, Tywin said. But whether she approves of this or not, I can't imagine Oberyn Martell will. If he confronts me, I will tell him the truth, that his queen allowed it, Arya said. He can be angry at me if he wants, but I could not have done this without permission from Daenerys Targaryen. So you're hoping to alienate the Dornish from her, Tywin said. Not alienate, Arya said. I'm planting a small seed of doubt. His mouth twitched. Nonetheless, you will have to prepare to face the consequences for it. Everything you do now will have a consequence, Arya. I know, Arya said, but I'll handle them. I have a strategy. And what is your strategy? Tywin asked, studying her carefully. It was a test, Arya knew. Of course he would use his last moments to assess her plan. He was so fond quizzing her. He had been doing it ever since they first met. Secure the realm, she said. Make sure that the Iron Throne is not the only seat of power. How will you do that? He asked. The board is already set perfectly, Arya said. Daenerys has taken the throne, but the lords and ladies of Westeros know that it was only a peaceful takeover because you and Margaery allowed it. Your trial was just inconclusive enough that they will doubt her verdict. The only reason they don't protest is because they fear the dragons, and there does not seem to be a better option. And because you pacified their liege lords, they won't make trouble until the time is right. They're all too tired to start another war after the long night. There will be peace, but an uneasy one. What if Daenerys turns the people to her side in that uneasy peace? Tywin asked. She's a charming woman. She could win them over and ease their worries. She can try all she likes. I'll still have more allies, Arya said. The West is a given, so is the North. Robb rules there, and my brother would never side with any queen against me, not even if we somehow grew to hate each other. Honor won't allow it. I'll also have the reach because once Mace Tyrell dies, Willas Tyrell will become the Lord, and my sister is married to him. I've seen enough of their interactions to know that Sansa will hold a great deal of sway in the realm. That means in war, the resources belong to us. Not to mention Sansa did well gathering information with the women of Winterfell during the Northern Civil War. I'm sure she could manage it on a larger scale. It wouldn't be a poor investment, Tywin said. Then I have the Riverlands, Arya said. The Tullys will back our side because of my mother, and since they are most involved in the rebuilding of the Vale, I suspect they will have a great deal of influence there. The Stormlands, once Margaery charms them all, will be on my side. Margaery may have given up her throne amicably, but I know it wasn't her first choice. She will gladly take any offer that sees her son back on that throne. I won't have the Greyjoys, but they will be spending all of their energy building back up their navy. I'll make sure that the Famarn navy outpaces them. And the Dornish? Tywin asked. You certainly won't have them, not after the marriage alliance and your actions here tonight. No, you're right, Arya said. But the Dornish against the rest of the 7 kingdoms, that doesn't seem like much of a contest. They would have to attack, and they've always been most effective when they defend their territory, if history is correct. What about the Unsullied and the Dothraki? Tywin asked. The Dothraki won't stay in Westeros, Arya said. You sound sure of it. I am, Arya said. They're nomads who are used to vast grasslands and warm temperatures year-round. Even this far south, this winter is hard on them, and their way of life will not mesh well with that of the lords of Westeros. To keep the peace, Daenerys will send most of them back to Essos to continue her work there. I'm sure the Unsullied will stay and become Daenerys' royal army. I won't dismiss them as a strong fight force. But they won't bear any children, which means they will age and their forces will eventually deplete. They may not be her only allies, Tywin said. You're right to say that most of the major families would fight for you, but their bannermen, if they saw the war as unjust, might turn to serve their queen rather than their lord. If the war is unjust, Arya said, I wouldn't attack unless I'm given cause. Tywin folded his hands together. Say that it did come to war then and you did happen to win, who would you place on the throne? You know the answer to that, Arya said. Your brother, from what I have observed, has little interest in ruling, Tywin said. He would need a queen with a talent for politics, as well as a good hand and counsel. Just like Tommen did. An idea came to Arya just then. Margaery is currently unwed, is she not? And she only has one son. That puts the Baratheon line in a precarious position, considering she has no spare children. That is true, Tywin said. And how would you solve that problem? Well, she would need to remarry someone who could give her more sons to bear the Baratheon name. Jon is noble and from a good family, but also, according to most of the country, a bastard by birth, so his children by her could be given the Baratheon name. And if later, some proof is found that Jon is the true-born son of a different family, that would make things less complicated. That it would, Tywin said, and do you think your brother would agree to such a match? He's been legitimized now. He'll have to marry eventually like all high-born lords, Arya said. A Stark and Baratheon match is wise for diplomacy, and what man would really deny Margaery? Very few, Tywin said. Do you foresee any other threats to this strategy of yours? The dragons, Arya said. They will be a problem as long as they live and follow their mother. It is possible that the green one can be turned now that Jon has ridden it. Dragons do not usually take a second rider until their first has died. As for the other, well, we'll find some way. She exhaled. Then of course there's Lord Varys. He has eyes and ears everywhere. I brought Merwin with me just to be sure that no one could walk this hall without me noticing. But then... You did say he played his role as expected. Yes, and he did, Tywin said. His confession put him in Deanery's good graces, but it happens that he has been watching you for some time and he has faith in your ability to keep the realm stable. You may hear from his little birds from time to time. Arya raised an eyebrow. So I have eyes and ears in King's Landing then? Tywin nodded once, standing from his seat and packing over to the window. It's not a bad plan, though you're focusing a great deal on the country as a whole without remembering the crucial first step. The first step, Arya asked. Consolidating power in the west, Tywin said. Strong ties with your allies mean nothing if your bannermen are unhappy. Your brother's situation in the north must have taught you as much. Some of the lords will have doubts about you and Jaime, especially considering that neither of you planned to go to war over my execution. They will see that as weakness. How will I convince them otherwise? Arya asked, standing as well and venturing toward him. I've left a letter for you in the Tower of the Hand. Tyrion agreed to keep it for me, Tywin said. It bears my seal and handwriting, and it insists that I order you and Jaime to stand down. Many will accept that. He turned back to face her. However, they may not settle completely. Some will test Jaime to see if he is as strong-willed as I was, and many of them will try to ignore you altogether. There's the problem of the mines as well. But Jaime will explain that to you later. Regardless, if they show opposition, you must strike fast and hard to assure them that House Lannister remains just as strong as it was. Do you understand? Yes, I understand. Arya swallowed hard. What about the rest of the strategy? Did it pass your test? Tywin studied her for a long time, an almost sad look in his eyes. Then, by way of answer, he returned to the table and picked up his goblet, raising it slightly. Arya flinched when he did. She had felt a sudden urge to smack it out of his hand, but even as she took a step forward, he had already raised the cup to his lips, drinking deeply. It was too late now. It was done. When the wine was finished, he set the cup on the table. How long? Not immediately, Arya murmured. But not very long either. It should be painless. Arya lowered her head, shutting her eyes tight as she felt the tears start to rise. It was the only thing I could do. It was more than I deserve, he said. A heavy silence fell upon the room and he sighed. Arya, look at me. She lifted her chin, cracking open her eyes again. You've done more than enough for me, he said. You can leave now if you'd like. It's done. You don't have to stay. Yes, Arya's voice cracked and she steeled herself to try again. Yes, I do. It's the last name on my list. I have to see it through. Your list? Tywin asked. Arya turned back toward the window, wrapping her arms tight around herself. I started it ages ago after my father died. I said the names every night before I went to bed. Names of people I was going to kill one day, when I got the chance, when I got strong enough. I added to that list over time. Her nails dug craters into her palms. Cersei, Joffrey, Meryn Trant, Elyn Payne, the Mountain, the Hound, Polliver, Walder Frey, Roose Bolton, Ramsay Bolton, Euron Greyjoy. She swallowed hard. Tywin Lannister. There was a long silence behind her, and she did not turn to look at him. It felt like something of a confession. That he had been on her list all of this time, but she could never bring herself to take him off one way or another. You added my name when we met, I'm sure, he said. Yes, Arya said. And now I'm the very last on the list, Tywin said. You've been working at that list for 7 years. Every name ended up dead one way or another. Arya nodded once. I'm more patient than you think, my lord. His voice held no anger. It did not seem to surprise him at all. Slowly she turned back to face him, and she found him looking at her with almost a sort of pride. Then I have faith in your ability to complete any more lists you might create. She wished she could smile at that, but her heart hurt too much. I thought about removing your name more than once. I'm glad you didn't. It means you have some sense. I did nothing to deserve being removed from your list, Tywin said. I don't think I did anything to deserve your tears either. She was crying again, wasn't she? She could feel it. She cursed herself inwardly as she hurried to wipe them away. Maybe not, but we don't get to choose what hurts us. I know, Tywin said. I've tried. Of course he had. Tywin had lost much in his many years. Parents, brothers, grandchildren, a daughter, a wife. But he had a reputation for feeling nothing. If he could have chosen what hurt and what didn't, he surely would have cut out what was left of his heart long ago. Tell me about her, Arya said. Your wife. Tywin seemed surprised at her command, and honestly Arya was surprised as well. It was impulse that had driven her to say those words. You've never asked about her before, Tywin said at last. I was always curious, just too afraid to ask, Arya admitted. But you're about to die, so if I don't ask now I'll never know. I haven't spoken much about her in years. That's because everyone was too afraid to ask. I suppose that's true. Tywin crossed to the table, pouring himself the last of wine from the pitcher and drinking long and deep. What exactly do you want to know? I'm not sure. What was she like? Stubborn, Tywin said. That's the first thing you remember, Arya asked. Stubborn. It was something I liked about her, Tywin said. She was one of the few people in this world who was not afraid to question me or fight back when she disagreed. After what happened with the rains, sometimes even my own family was not quite sure how to speak with me. She never seemed to have that problem. I didn't think you liked being challenged, Arya said. It depends on the situation, Tywin said, and the person, but she was often quite vexing and impossible to argue with, perhaps because she only argued when she had a point to make. She was an intelligent woman. He tapped his fingers against the edge of his mug. And she was good with people, even the ones she hated. She never forgot her courtesies. She was a proper lady then, Arya said. Oh yes, she excelled at most of the activities of proper ladies, Tywin said. Though she would rather be damned than keep her mouth shut when she had opinion. Some might have considered that improper. Arya couldn't help but grin. She seemed an interesting woman. She had been dead for such a long time now. She could not help but wonder what Tywin might have been like if she had lived. I think I would have liked her. She would have liked you, Tywin said, setting down his cup. There, does that satisfy your curiosity? Enough, I suppose. I have a better picture of her, Arya said. I'm sorry for prying. Tywin tilted his head to the side, observing her. I really don't believe that you are. He was right, she wasn't. I haven't prayed to the Seven in some time, Arya said, but I did always like the idea that we could see the dead again when it's all over. It's a comforting thought, Tywin said, drifting back toward the table in the center of the room. Though, if the Septon's vision of the 7 heavens and 7 hells is correct, I don't believe I will be seeing her. Arya swallowed hard as she watched him. He was standing a bit strangely, and she knew the poison must be advancing. Well, maybe they're wrong. There are so many different gods in this world. Which do you believe in? Tywin asked. I'm not sure. After all I've seen, I'm really not sure, Arya said. But my teacher always said that death was the only true god, and the only thing we say to death is not today. Tywin considered the phrase. Interesting. Did he tell you what to say to death if it unavoidable? Arya shook her head. No, I'm afraid not. Pity. Tywin swayed for a moment then, resting his hand on the table to catch himself. Arya rushed forward on instinct to grasp his arm and help him into a chair. He blinked hard as if to clear his vision. It was happening. 7 hells, it was happening. That thought hit Arya like a punch to the stomach, and she sank to her knees in front of him. She wanted to run and find help. She wanted to do something besides watch. Tears of panic pressed at her eyes, and she clutched at his hand as if that would do any good, as if she could keep him there through such a simple gesture. Tywin, It's all right, he muttered. His voice, despite everything, was still steady. Calm. She had no idea how he could be so calm. It's not, Arya choked out. I'm not ready for this yet, please. Yes, you are, you'll be all right. She felt his other hand rest against her cheek as the tears began to spill over. Arya. She looked up at him, tears spilling down her cheeks. He shook his head. I'll never be able to understand how I earned your grief. I was one of the worst things to happen to you, even though you were one of the better things to happen to me. Arya let out something between a laugh and a sob. You weren't the worst, my lord, believe me. His thumb grazed along her cheek, wiping away a few of the tears. They've given you quite a few names, since you killed the Night King, Nightslayer, hero of Harrenhal, but I heard an interesting one some time ago, Winter's Fury. You named your sword that, I believe. His breathing was laboured and Arya hated to hear it. She wanted to tell him to be quiet and rest, but she also wanted to keep talking to him. Yes, that's what I named my sword, she said. You earned its name then. I did, didn't I, and it only took me a few years. His mouth twitched into a small smile, and gods how it ripped through her to see that expression on his face. And now comes the harder part, living up to all of your names as time wears on. He let out a long sigh and seemed to sink back into his chair. Don't be too reckless. I'll try, Arya mumbled, grasping his hand tighter as if that could keep him there with her. He nodded as if satisfied by her answer. Trying was all that she could promise. She wanted to promise other things as well, that his legacy would continue, that the West would be stable, that she would manage everything. But when she looked up at him again, she realized that his eyes had closed. Her heart clenched. Lord Tywin, he did not respond. Tywin, are you? Her voice cracked. Please don't. Not yet, Tywin, say something else, one last thing, anything. He was silent and still in his seat, and Arya realized that his hand had gone slack in her grasp. She stared up at him for a long moment, hoping that he might open his eyes again, hoping he might respond. And when he didn't, she let her head fall to rest against his hand, and she cried as a daughter might for a father. Because, despite being so terrible a man, that was what Tywin Lannister was to her in the end. Jaime and Tyrion had decided to spend the night drinking together instead of sleeping. It was Tyrion's offer, and Jaime had gladly accepted. He had left a note in their room telling Arya where to find them if she wished to join them in their sorrows. He knew she would not be sleeping tonight either. Why did she come to speak with Daenerys? Jaime asked. I don't know. The Queen hasn't summoned me back to discuss it, Tyrion said, though I suspect it might have something to do with father. Will Arya's words do any good? Jaime asked. No, once the sentence is passed, a strong ruler cannot revoke it. That would show too much indecision, Tyrion said. But maybe Arya is doing what father wished and trying to establish a cordial relationship with the Queen. Jaime's mouth twitched. Arya doing as their father wished. That was a funny thought. Well, it was the end of his life. Perhaps she wanted to give him that gift before he died. I don't think I want to go to the execution tomorrow, Tyrion said. No matter what the method, it's just not something one really wants to watch. If she plans to use dragons, I won't go, Jaime said. I watched the Mad King burn enough people alive. I won't watch the same happen to our father. Tyrion shivered. No, but I think that she will take a more merciful course. Jaime hoped that she would. He hoped that she would choose to appease new allies instead of the Dornish. Even if she does, it's hard to imagine watching him die. Yes, Tyrion agreed. I'm sure all men struggle to watch their fathers die, even when their fathers were terrible men. I can't imagine what we would feel like now if our father was any sort of decent person. Oh, neither can I, Jaime said, but if our father was any sort of decent person, a lot of things would be different. That they would. Tyrion raised his cup and drank deeply. Jaime sighed. I suppose Arya would know. She watched her father die, and Ned Stark was a decent man and father by all accounts. Must have been terrible for her, Tyrion murmured. So young at the time, she probably didn't think her father could die. Jaime didn't reply. Somehow he hadn't thought his could die either until recently. Logically he knew that all men died at some point or another, yet Tywin Lannister still seemed different from the rest. What a foolish thought that was. At least she has experience with this sort of thing, Tyrion said. Should make it easier this time around. I'm not sure it will, Jaime said. It seems it's just bringing many bad memories back to the surface for her. Tyrion nodded once, pouring himself another cup of wine. Has she been to see him yet, to say goodbye? Not yet, she's been putting it off, Jaime said. But she'll go. She would never forgive herself if she didn't. I'm sure she wouldn't, Tyrion said. You know, none of us should go tomorrow. We should all stay right here in this room hiding away. He was half joking and yet half not. That would show weakness, wouldn't it? Jaime asked. I don't care, Tyrion said. I think it's better this way. I'd rather leave things as we did in that room than leave them on the executioner's block. Jaime studied him. Did you really leave things so well? Not perfectly, Tyrion said. He didn't exactly fall on his knees and beg forgiveness. I would have hated him for it if he did. He shook his head. I already hate him a bit, for saying that he didn't blame me for what I am. His brother's voice cracked slightly, and Jaime reached out to rest a hand on his shoulder. That's the closest to an apology you could get from father, isn't it? Yes, he's a terrible man in that way. Tyrion drank again. This was his third cup already. I hate myself for wanting him to live. Jaime felt the same. He loved his father as most sons would, even despite everything that had happened between them, and his father had lived a longer life than most. He had outlasted nearly all of the lords who reigned in the time of Robert's rebellion, and it was not as if he was paying for crimes he did not commit. He was guilty. Jaime knew it, but selfishly, he still wanted him to survive. It will be over soon, I suppose, Tyrion said. I wish it already was. The door creaked open and Jaime looked up to see Arya slipping through the door. Her expression was numb, but when he looked closer, he could see that her eyes were red. Had she just come from seeing Tywin? My lady, Tyrion said. Welcome, I'll pour you some wine and you can join us. She didn't reply. She just managed a single nod but did not make a motion toward the table. Jaime rose and went over to her, resting a hand on her upper arm. She was trembling. Had visiting his father really left her in such a state? Arya, Jaime murmured, are you all right? She nodded again. A lie, such a terrible lie. Listen, you do not have to attend the execution tomorrow, Jaime said. I know you think it would be weakness, but it's not. We'll say you took ill. You don't have to put yourself through this. I already did, she said. Her voice was so soft that he almost didn't hear her. What? Jaime asked. I already attended it. Arya swallowed hard. Daenerys gave me permission to take care of it painlessly. Jaime took a long moment to process the words. He looked from Arya to his brother as it dawned on him what she was saying, and when he looked back to Arya, he saw her numb expression begin to crack. He's gone, she muttered. He's already... Her body seemed to collapse beneath the weight of her own words, and Jaime caught her in his arms, holding her tight against his chest. Daenerys gave me permission. That was what she had gone to speak to the Queen about, not saving Tywin, but giving him some painless end, and she had given it to him herself. He's gone. Jaime slowly sank to his knees, still holding Arya close. Tears that he hadn't cried in some time burned at his eyes. He felt his brother behind him, gripping his shoulder tight in his hand. He's gone. And now the last of his children bore that fact together. Chapter 107, A Wolf in Lion's Clothing. It was strange to see his body, when he was already gone. In the Sept of Baelor, he lay on the table at the centre, 2 stones on his eyes, painted as if to pretend he could still see. His robes were black and studded with gold. His hands were rested on his chest as if he were asleep, peaceful, but he was not breathing and his skin was cold and pale. Arya did not want to see him like this, and yet she kept watch. It seemed worse somehow, to leave him. Daenerys had announced to the court the previous day that Tywin was given a private execution as acknowledgement for his help during the long night. Because the realm was peaceful, he was given a peaceful death. Whatever his sins in life, it was left to the Seven to judge. Or so Tyrion had reported. Arya had stayed in her room trying to save the strength she would need for the funeral, and she could not bear in that moment to hear anyone speak of him. So she locked herself up with her own memories, playing over his last moments over and over again in her mind, and the moments before that as well, memories from her 17th year, her 16th year, her 15th, all the way back to her 12th year when she first met him, because she wanted to remember. Forgetting would be even worse than watching him die. After her father had lost his head, she had not been so intentional with her memories. Instead, she had dedicated her mind to her list of names of people she meant to kill. She had spent hours turning over their faces and the terrible things they had done and the terrible things she wished to do to them. And in the midst of her hatred, she had forgotten to remember her father. She had lost so much of him over these years, so many words, so many moments. Sometimes it was even hard to recall his face. She wouldn't make that mistake again, so as painful as it was, she forced herself to remember, from the end to the beginning. Don't be too reckless. I'm not going to give you another chance to throw yourself into the jaws of death. This time you may not come back. There will be time to rest after this. This will be the last war for some time, and it will be my last war. I'm sure you'll manage. Families like ours must consider the future and our standing in everything we do, or we could lose it. Reset the board then, if you enjoy winning this foolish game so much. When I die, show them you will not accept anything less than the same respect. I'm glad to see you awake again. Hopefully this is your last brush with death for some time. I had no choice. When someone insults the Lannister name, I respond in kind. I thought you were past trying to lie to me. Careful, girl, you're far overstepping. You forget your place. A strong name for a strong sword. Make sure you earn it, Arya Stark. You told the man a name, that's all. You did not even pay him for his trouble. Let the gods decide if that makes you guilty. I don't need a crown to give me power, Lady Arya. The crown is really just another trick, the same as just causes. You always lift your chin like that when you're nervous. You ought to correct that, or soon everyone will be able to tell. Come on, girl, let's hear your brother's choice. You should mind that tongue of yours. Being so honest is what gets you Starks in trouble. You're lying, let's try once again. Tell me your name. You're too smart for your own good. Has anyone told you that? You'll do no such thing. This one's a girl, you idiot. She had to remember, because she would have no more words from him. That was the hardest part. Her memories were all she had now. Her mother had brought food to her room halfway through the day, and they ate together beside the window. Were you there, her mother asked, during this private execution? Yes, Arya said softly, I was the executioner. Her mother let out a heavy breath at that, reaching up to brush her hair back. Oh, Arya, I'm sorry. Are you? Arya asked. You hated him. Most days, yes, Catelyn said, but you didn't, so I could not hate him completely. No, Arya didn't hate him, not even a little bit at the end. You still shouldn't have had to put yourself through such a thing, Catelyn said. It's fine, Arya said. I just couldn't see him beheaded, I couldn't. I know, Arya, I know. Now, the next day, Arya stood in the Sept of Baelor, keeping watching over his body, and the one small bit of joy she could take out of this was knowing he had not died on the steps outside. Jaime stood beside her, silent and still. He had practiced standing guard like this, though not over his own father. Arya had apologized profusely for not telling him her plan. She was too afraid someone would try to talk her out of it. Jaime did not seem to resent her, though. He died peacefully, he had murmured in her ear. That was the best you could give him. Yes, there was little else she could do. She wasn't sure how long they stood there together, as crowds and crowds of lords and ladies came to pay their respects. She did not count the hours, but she watched the beams of sunlight shift across the floor. Tyrion stood with them for a while, though he was quite busy with other matters that day as well. Putting out fires, he called it. If you are approached by Oberyn, try to keep calm, Tyrion warned Arya. He is not happy. No, he wouldn't be, and Arya understood why. I'll handle him. Try not to start any wars when you do, Tyrion said. Arya recognized many of the other faces who came to pay respects. Jenna Lannister, for instance. She did not cry as she looked over her brother, but Arya could sense her grief none the less. I heard what you did for him at the end, Jenna said. I thank you for that. I don't think I could have stood to see him on his knees. Neither could I, Arya said softly. Jenna smiled sadly, resting a hand on her shoulder. I'm your aunt by marriage, which means I am also your ally. If you should need me, you have only to ask, Lady Arya. Arya's mouth twitched. Thank you, Lady Jenna, I'll keep that in mind. The rest of Arya's family came to pay respects too. So many Starks who had at one point wanted Tywin dead. Even Arya had wanted him dead a long time ago. And here they were, honouring him on the day of his death. Her mother, her brother, her sister. It was a strange sight to see. Jon came as well, though he had very few interactions with Lord Tywin. His face was grim, but Arya guessed it was not because of Tywin's death. He was thinking of the secret of his name which Tywin knew. Before he was arrested, Lord Tywin spoke with me, Jon said. He asked if I would be willing to claim my birthright if it was ever necessary, if you asked me. He looked down at Arya. Would you ask me, Arya? She hesitated before she answered. Only in dire circumstances, Jon. You know I'd never want to put you in danger. Jon nodded once. I know, it doesn't matter though. I just want you to know that I am with you, Arya. If you ask, if you deem it necessary, I am with you. She rested a hand on his arm, squeezing tightly. Thank you, I hope I never have to. And she did. She had a plan all carefully constructed in her mind, but she hoped very much that the Queen turned out to be wise and kind and loyal, and that she would rule the kingdoms well. This wasn't about vengeance for Arya. She wanted to make sure she could protect those she cared about. She didn't want to lose anyone ever again. When the sun had fallen, the Silent Sisters prepared the body to be transporting back to the west, to rest beside the other fallen Lannisters. Arya wished she could go west with him, just to make sure that nothing happened along the way, but she still had business to take care of here. They slid a lid over his coffin, and Arya knew that was the last time she would see him. Now his face would live only in her memories. The thought made her shiver, but she did not cry. She had no tears left to cry. She and Jaime lingered in the darkness of the sept for a while after they removed him, neither wanting to leave. Neither wanted to speak. It felt as if they could go on standing there forever in the comfortable silence, until time stopped and the sept crumbled around them. So that's it then, Jaime said at last. It's over. For him, Arya murmured, staring straight ahead at the table where Tywin lay a little while ago. The space felt awfully empty without him. The whole of King's Landing felt emptier without him, and it was left to them to fill the space. I think it's just beginning for us. The next morning, Arya called upon Syrio to give her a lesson, because she needed to leave her troubles behind for a little while. She knew that somewhere in the Tower of the Hand, Tywin had left a letter for her, but she could not bring herself to retrieve it. Not yet. Just for this moment, she needed to forget. As she sparred with her master, she let her muscle memory take over. She let herself move without thinking as they danced around each other, striking out with wooden practice swords. It really was like moving through water. Easy, peaceful. She very nearly scored a hit on Syrio's stomach, but he twisted around her and knocked her to the floor. She landed hard on her back and found his staff against her neck. Dead, he said. I always am with you, Arya said, pushing his sword to the side and getting back to her feet. Well, tell me how sloppy I was. Tell me I'm with my trouble. Syrio smiled. I do not come here to tell you lies, girl. Today is one of the first times I've ever seen you leave your trouble behind. You were quite excellent. She blinked. That is strange. It feels as if I have so many troubles right now. Of course you do, Syrio said. There has never been one moment in your life since I've met you that you have not had troubles. You're just learning to set them aside. He stepped forward, resting a hand on her arm. It doesn't mean they are not serious. It does not mean the current is not rough, but you swim with it, you do not fight it, and that is smart. Arya gave him a soft smile. I guess I'm finally learning then. The door creaked open, and Arya turned to see a familiar figure leaning against the archway, looking at her with sharp eyes. I thought I might find you here, Oberyn said smoothly. Lady Lannister. And does the Lady Lannister want to be found by you? Syrio asked before Arya could respond. Because if not, you are not welcome in this place. We are practicing. It's all right, Syrio, Arya said. Her voice came out surprisingly calm. I can handle this. Perhaps we should end early today. Syrio gave her a little bow. Then he made his way past Oberyn, never taking his eyes off of the Prince of Dawn. Not until he was out of the room. and even then Arya suspected he might be waiting in the hall. Arya let the tip of her sparring sword rest against the stone as she studied Oberyn with a steady gaze. "I wondered when you would find me, Prince Oberyn." "I'm sure you did," Oberyn said. "It's only natural that I would want to speak with Tywin Lannister's executioner." The words strung, but she did not let the hurt show on her face. "Yes, it's only natural." His smile was sharp as he approached her. "I should have known you would take matters into your own hands, Arya. I was watching you through the court and the trial. Of course you would find a way to give Tywin a painless death even though he doesn't deserve it." "I asked the Queen permission and she allowed it," Arya said. "I could not have given him that end without her blessing." "I'm quite sure you would have found a way," Oberyn said. "We'll never know, I suppose," Arya said. He was stopped in front of her now. His hands were free of any weapon, but she could see his dagger clear enough in his belt. She didn't think he would draw it, but Arya was nothing if not careful. "There is something fitting about him dying of poison," Oberyn said. "I might have chosen that method if the court had declared him not guilty. I would have selected a different poison, though. Something a bit slower, more painful. It would still be more than he deserved." His eyes narrowed. "But you had no right to decide on his death, Lady Arya." "Neither of us did," Arya said. "That honor belonged to the Queen, and she chose." She started to walk past him and he turned with her, catching her arm. She turned in one fluid motion, pressing the tip of her wooden sword against his throat. It would not kill him, but she could do some damage to his windpipe if she so chose. Oberyn was unfazed. "She chose that way because you asked, and she desperately wants your alliance. You used that against her, but you could have left it alone," Oberyn said. His grip tightened on her arm. "Do you think my sister had a peaceful death, or her children? Why did their murderer deserve what they never had?" "He didn't deserve it," Arya said. "I know what he was, Prince Oberyn, and you're right, but I'm selfish and I did not want to watch him suffer." She jerked her arm out of his grip, shoving him back with the tip of her wooden practice sword. "I could have demanded his life, you know. Asked that he be exiled or sent to the wall. I believe the Queen would have given me that. But I didn't. I respected her judgment. He died. Isn't that enough for you?" "Not if it was on his terms," Oberyn said. "If he put you up to this." "He didn't," Arya said. "I decided this. It was the only thing I decided. Everything else was on his terms." Oberyn's eyes narrowed, and for the first time he seemed a bit caught off guard. "What?" "I mean the trial," Arya said. "The arrest, the trial, the death sentence. All of that was on his terms, Oberyn. You didn't seem to have a problem with it then." He blinked, and Arya realized that he was genuinely confused. "I don't know what you're talking about. The trial wasn't on his terms. None of it was." "You didn't know," Arya realized. She hadn't prepared for that. She had thought for sure Daenerys had discussed her plans with her allies. Surely her deal with Tywin must have come up. "Didn't you wonder why Lord Tywin was so compliant through everything?" "I assumed it was his refusal to show weakness," Oberyn said. "He never was one to cower." "No, and he had no reason to cower, because it was all exactly according to his plan," Arya said. "He cut a deal with Daenerys before the long night began. He promised her a peaceful transition onto the throne. He promised to stand trial. He promised to die, so long as she pardoned Jaime and let the Lannisters maintain Casterly Rock. They both kept their bargain. But this, all of it was on his terms." Oberyn stepped away from her, running a frustrated hand through his hair. She could see some of his belief in Daenerys cracking, some of his belief in her justice. She had dealt with a devil behind his back, and then pretended that she had brought him to heel on her own. Oberyn was smart, and surely he must have suspected as much, but he wanted to believe that Tywin was finally beaten. "I'm sorry," Arya said. "I thought you knew." "No," Oberyn said. "If Tywin Lannister was smart, he would have advised the Queen not to tell me, and apparently she took his advice more than once." "It doesn't matter anymore. It's done. The last name crossed off of both of our lists," Arya said. She let her wooden sword lower to the ground. "Now I'm just tired. I don't want to start a vendetta with you, Oberyn. I don't want to be friends either. I'd just like the West and Dawn to live with each other a bit better than we did before." Oberyn studied her. "You weren't involved at all in their deal, were you?" "No," Arya said. "I was as surprised as you when I heard about it." "Sacrificing himself to set the board for a win," Oberyn muttered. "The bastard might have made a good Syvas player." "He was," Arya said softly. "I taught him to play." He didn't have anything to say to that. She wondered if he could even begin to understand how painful it was for her to give that poison to him, knowing it was all she could do. Likely not. He couldn't understand why she could feel anything for such a man. She barely understood it herself. She let her practice sword fall and walked past him. This time he did not try to stop her. "Safe travels, Prince Oberyn," she said, "until we meet again." She knew they would after all, even if many years passed before that time. Oberyn Martell was not the kind of man who disappeared completely. The only question would be whether he resurfaced as an ally or an enemy. Until then, she had other matters to take care of. "It was kind of you to give your father-in-law such an end," Varys observed as Arya handed him a goblet of wine. "I know that he was prepared for much worse. However, did you convince him to drink it?" "The Queen allowed it, as I said," Arya said, "so there was no harm." Varys nodded. "No harm indeed. The Queen clearly recognizes your influence in the realm. It's a good thing. It means that you will be able to gain more than one favor from her, but if you become too powerful, she may begin to see you as a threat." "That's exactly why I deferred to her judgment," Arya said. "If I had gone behind her back, she would have seen it as a challenge, so I didn't." "So instead you made a sweet plea in order to give the illusion that she determines your actions," Varys said. "I wouldn't call my plea sweet," Arya sipped at her wine, "but yes, I suppose." Varys smiled. "I imagine you'll be on your way to the west soon." "I will," Arya said. "I hope to hear from your little birds while I'm there." "Not to worry, my little birds are all over Westeros," Varys said. "In the meantime, can my little birds be of service to you here?" "I think so," Arya said. "Jaime tells me that there are still wildfire caches under the city. Find them and move them somewhere safe, away from so many people. Having them still in their place could be temptation to some." "Undoubtedly," Varys said. "And meanwhile, I'm sure Daenerys will be namming a new Master of Coin soon," Arya said. "When she does, remind the Master of Coin of the Crown's debts. The Iron Bank is not to be trifled with if the stories are true. They will still expect payment even though a new ruler sits on the throne." "If I understand correctly, the Crown is also in debt to the Lannisters," Varys said. Arya shrugged. "Yes, you can remind them of that too if you wish." Varys grinned. "You're an intriguing woman, Lady Lannister. I think the old Lord of the Rock was right to have faith in you." "It would be an insult to his memory if I proved him wrong," Arya said. "I look forward to hearing from you, Lord Varys." "The Vale is still in ruins," her mother told her as they circled the gardens. "The Eyrie all but destroyed and unusable. Rebuilding it will be a mighty task." "Maybe it would be more sensible to build a keep closer to the ground," Arya said. "At least for now. The Vale will need a seat of power to calm the chaos, and rebuilding the Eyrie would take years," Catelyn said. "Perhaps until the next winter. Yes, I know there are other keeps with good strategic positions that are less ruined than the Eyrie, and then there's a question of who will take the seat." "One of the bannermen of the Vale, no doubt," Arya said. "You should use the opportunity to re-establish strong ties between the Riverlands and the Vale. I know you and my aunt were a bit strained by the end, but the Arryns, Starks and Tullys used to be strong allies in the rebellion. It should be that way again." "It will be," Catelyn said. "It's bound to happen. The North and the Riverlands are both neighbours of the Vale, and we're the ones helping them the most despite the fact that our regions are also torn by the long night." There was a note of bitterness in her voice, as if she thought the Queen could be doing more to help with the reconstruction. "You know, if you need help you can reach out to me," Arya said. "I control the Lannister family coffers now, and Lord Tywin did enough damage to the Riverlands during the War of Five Kings. It only makes sense that I repay some of the damages." Her mother smiled. "Somehow that doesn't sound like something Lord Tywin would consider constructive." "That's not true at all," Arya said. "I'm forming strong alliances with other regions. He left it to my digression how." She rested a hand on her mother's shoulder. "Just tell Uncle Edmure and Uncle Brynden that they can ask for my help. I'm a Lannister, but I'm also their family." "I'll tell them," Catelyn said. "It would be nice for the Riverlands to have some peace after all of this war." Yes, it would. It would be nice for all of Westeros to know peace for a while, and Arya hoped they would, but she would be ready in case the peace failed. Stefan had just learned to walk, and he spent most of his time stomping around the room on unsteady legs, regularly almost crashing into tables. Arya watched the scepter herd him away from a particularly sharp corner as Margaery sat down at the table with her, setting a cup of wine in front of her. "He has an awful lot of energy," she said. "At least he's a happy baby. He laughs more than he cries." He seems strong, Arya said. He needs to be, Margaery said. He's the best hope for the Baratheon line. Any children I have now, they might have the Baratheon name but not Baratheon blood. You will need to have more children then, Arya asked. Of course, Margaery said. It's terrible to say it, but children die all of the time. I can't rest all of my hopes on the one. They lords of the Stormlands will want spares. I'm sure many will come forward with offers of marriage. But there's a danger there too, isn't there? Arya asked. They'll want any of your children to take their names, and then those children could be a threat to Stefan. You read my fears well, Margaery said. I don't know any of the lords of the Stormlands well enough to trust them, and I know how men are when they see a chance to climb for power. I won't let any of them take my son from me. You need a suitor with no need to force his name on your children then, Arya said. Someone with little ambitions who would be kind to Stefan. Yes, that would be ideal, Margaery said. Seems it would be hard to find such a man. Arya clasped her hands together. Have you spoken at all with my brother Jon? Your bastard brother, Margaery asked. Or, I suppose he's been legitimized now, Jon Stark is it? Yes, Arya said. He's one of the kindest men I've ever met. Comes from a good family, but as he's a bastard he could not really assert his name over yours. And a Stark and Baratheon alliance, that does call back to the days of the rebellion. Margaery tilted her head to the side. You're up to something. What are you planning exactly? To match a strong politician with my Targaryen brother and cultivate a strong line of heirs in case Daenerys goes mad, Arya thought. But she knew she could not say that here. There were too many ears. I can't tell you at the moment, Arya said, but it's something that would work very much to your advantage. Do you trust me? Margaery studied Arya for a long time before she nodded. Yes, I trust you, she sighed. Your brother is quite good looking. I suppose it would be amiss to speak with him before he goes north. He's a hero in the long night after all. I haven't thanked him. She stretched. Though I can't guarantee he'll like me, Arya. Arya smiled. What man wouldn't like you? Shortly after the funeral, Arya was forced to say more goodbyes, but at least these were of a less permanent sort. Her first goodbye was to Sansa. And so we part again, Sansa said. I'll miss you, Arya. I'll miss you too, Arya said. Her sister had no choice but to leave sooner than everyone else. If she did not go now, the baby might come before she reached High Garden. Arya met her in the stables to see her off. Her husband Willers was helping with the horses as she and Sansa stood off in the corner, watching. How are you adjusting to the Reach? Well enough, it is a beautiful place, Sansa said. And what about the people? Arya said. Do they like you? You are an outsider, so it would not be surprising if more than one of them resented you for marrying Willers. More than one does, I'm sure, Sansa said. But I'm working on it. I've learned a great deal from Lady Olenna, and I mastered courtesy a very long time ago. I know that much, Arya said. I hope the Lannisters and the Tyrells can continue to have a close alliance. We are neighbours and it's worked well for us in the past. I will make sure that we stay in an alliance, Sansa said. Good, Arya said. I also wondered, that trick you pulled with the women in the north during the Northern Civil War. What about it? Sansa asked. It was very helpful then. It could be helpful in the future, Arya said. Women often go unseen in this world. They hear interesting things. What things would you want them to hear? Sansa asked. I'm not sure yet, Arya said. There's no conflict on the horizon. I just want to be prepared. I don't want anything like the Northern Civil War to catch us off guard ever again. No, I don't want that either, Sansa glanced at Arya. I'll see what I can do and we'll keep in touch. Arya smiled, carefully embracing her sister. I'll visit you in the Reach. I'll need to meet my niece. Sansa raised an eyebrow. And what makes you so sure I'll have a girl? I'm not sure, Arya said. Just a feeling you'd be a good mother to a daughter. Thank you, Sansa said. Take care of yourself, Arya. Try not to hold up the sky by yourself. I don't need to, Arya said. I have my family to help. Maury of Arya's family left shortly after that. First, Jon, who agreed to accompany Margaery on a detour to the Stormlands before headed north. I told her that the Night's Watch was all but broken, and that I was concerned for their future, even though I was no longer one of them, Jon said. She believes that the 7 kingdoms should be vigilant about threats to the north from now on. I figured that since she was queen until recently, she has enough influence to help. That makes sense, Arya said, trying not to smile. It would be wise for you to visit the Stormlands and the other southern regions asking for help, and perhaps you can visit the west on your way north. It will be nice to see a familiar face. I'll try, Jon said, ruffling her hair. Until then, little sister. Only a few days later, it was time to say goodbye to her mother and her other brother. I'll see you again soon, her mother promised. Robb may be going north, but I'm on my way to the Reach, and I'm sure you will be stopping by as soon as Sansa has her baby. I will, Arya said. Nonetheless, she hugged her tightly. Thank you for being there for me through all of this. You kept me grounded. It's my job as your mother, Catelyn murmured in her ear, and I missed so many years of you growing up. I'm making up for lost time. Robb stepped up to them as they pulled back from their hug. For a moment he seemed a bit stiff, as if he wondered whether or not Arya resented him for not being able to save Tywin. She gave him a smile and leapt into his arms as if they were children again, throwing her arms around his neck. I'll miss you, she murmured. Make sure you write often. If there's anything you need, let me know. I will, he said, embracing her tightly. The same goes for you. Whatever happens in the future, whatever you need, I'm with you. Yes, Arya knew that. The North was the one place that she had no uncertainty about at all. Even if all other alliances fell away, the Stark and Lannister alliance would remain strong. What a funny thing that was. Robb glanced over Arya's head as he set her down. Sir Jaime, come to see us off. Arya turned to see Jaime quickly approaching. He had his sword unbuckled from his belt and clasped his hand as if he hadn't had time to put it on in his rush. Something like that. I actually have something for you, Lord Stark, a parting gift. He held out his sword hilt first. This should have gone to you a long time ago, but I know my father wouldn't have approved of me giving it away. Arya's eyes widened as she realized what he was doing, but Robb still seemed confused. Your sword, why should it have gone to me? Because it's made from one half of your father's sword, Jaime said. My father had it melted down into 2 blades. We lost our own ancestral blade some time ago, you see, and my father never balks from making use of a tragedy. But well, Ned Stark would hate to see me carrying half of the Stark family sword. Robb seemed absolutely bewildered by the gift. He reached out slowly, drawing the blade from its scabbard and looking it over. This is truly half of my father's sword. Yes, Jaime said, and now it's yours. Robb looked from the blade to Jaime. What happened to the other half? I'm sorry, I thought you knew, Jaime said. Your sister has been carrying it for some time. Winter's Fury, the sword my father gave her as payment for saving his life. That's the other half. Robb looked to Arya and she swallowed hard. Sorry, I should have told you, but I was worried you might want to claim it if you knew. Robb shook his head. I wouldn't, Arya. Father would hate to see his sword in the hands of a Lannister, unless it's you, of course. He looked back to Jaime. You truly mean to give this up? No family needs 2 Valyrian steel swords. That's just greedy, Jaime said. It's yours, pass it down to your children, and Arya's blade will pass to ours. I think that's fair. Robb nodded once. Thank you, Sir Jaime. He held out his arm. I hope our families will remain on good terms so long as the swords remain. Jaime clasped his arm in his. So do I. He turned and gave Catelyn a little bow. She was looking on him with some fondness for perhaps the first time. Lady Stark, I hope the roads are kind. The same to you, Catelyn said. Take care of my daughter, whenever she can't take care of herself at least. Jaime smiled. I plan to. When they were gone and Jaime and Arya were left alone in the courtyard, she glanced up at him. I didn't know you were going to do that. I've wanted to give him that sword for some time, but I was too afraid of Father's reaction, Jaime said. But I don't have to fear that anymore. Thank you, Arya said. My father always meant for Robb to have his sword. I felt guilty keeping this half for myself. You shouldn't, Jaime said. Your father would not object to it. He would be proud if he could see you now. Even though I'm a Lannister, Arya raised an eyebrow. Yes, even then. That's how exceptional you are, my lady, Jaime said with a little bow. She gave him a shove, then a kiss. The last few days had been very difficult, but knowing that her 2 families were at peace, that made things much easier. A few days later, Arya climbed the Tower of the Hand for what she imagined would be the last time in a while. Tyrion was there, writing a letter when she arrived. He glanced up and gave her a small smile before returning to his writing. The Dornish left this morning. Oberyn was in one piece, it seems. Yes, Arya said. We did speak, but neither of us wanted to start a war. Wise decision, Tyrion said. Arya couldn't help but wonder if Oberyn had confronted the Queen about her deal with Tywin, or had he hid that knowledge away in his heart for later use. Either way, she was sure she had driven a wedge between the Red Viper and the Queen, an even larger wedge than she had intended. Arya pulled at the 3 fingers of her right hand. Before he died, Lord Tywin said there was a letter here for me. Yes, Tyrion said. On the shelf, he said you'll know which one it is. Arya's brow furrowed as she walked to the shelf, not sure what that meant, but she stopped when she saw 2 letters stacked beneath a Sivas piece, the king with the cracked crown. She felt something between a sob and a laugh well up within her, and she shoved them both down, taking the letters and packing to the other end of the room. She sat herself in the corner where she had often studied while Tywin was busy with matters of state, and she read his last words to her. Arya, the 2nd letter is meant for the Lords of the West. It is written in my hand explaining that my death was necessary in order to preserve the Lannister family. They are meant to serve you and Jaime as loyally as they did me. They will honour my words and seal. If they do not, treat it as if they were defying me. Strike fast, strike hard. Arya almost had to laugh at that first paragraph. He opened with orders, having no time for soft sentiments. That was very like him. I know you have your doubts about whether or not you are ready, but I have every confidence in you, and you know I do not give my confidence lightly. I would not have agreed to die if I was not sure the West was in good hands. Make sure the Lannister legacy is secure. That should be simpler now that you and Jaime are on good terms again, and the Lords of the West will soon expect an heir. Arya had no doubt of that, but she knew at this rate wouldn't be long before she and Jaime provided one. That was a strange thing to think about, but the next words she read were stranger still. I am sorry. Sorry, had she ever heard Tywin Lannister apologize before, about anything? Just reading those words in his hand made her shudder. I am sorry. When I planned my death, I knew it was best for the Lannister family. I didn't realize that you would grieve for me. I think you've had entirely too much grief in your life because of me and my family. Forgive me for this then, I should have known. All of my children have accused me of favoring you above the rest of them. I'm not sure of the validity of their claims, but I did think of you as a daughter, and I am sorry to leave you. Earn your new titles, Arya, and if the dead can meet again, I hope we do not meet for a very long time. Tywin Lannister. He did not sign with any of his titles, for he had given them up, and by that point Arya would not have been able to read them. Her eyes were blurred with tears as she clutched the letter tight in her hands. Arya, Tyrion had circled around his desk to go to her side. Are you all right? I'm fine. She quickly wiped away her tears and stood, holding the open and sealed letter close to her chest, along with the broken king. I should go. Jaime and I are leaving for the West tomorrow. There's a lot to pack, and we both have a lot of work to do. Yes, I'd say we do, Tyrion said, glancing down at the letter. If I know father, I'm sure he gave you enough orders to keep you very busy. Arya cracked a smile. He always does. The morning they left King's Landing, the fields were covered in a fine mist. The sun was barely up, but Tyrion came to bid them farewell before they went. Don't be strangers, he said, and write as often as you can. I'll do the same. We will, Arya said, bending to pull Tyrion into a hug. Take care of yourself and the kingdom, that's your job now. That it is, he pulled back from her. I'll do my best. The pin suits you, little brother, Jaime said. I hope we see you again soon. You will, Tyrion said. King's Landing and Casterly Rock aren't so far away, and I'm sure the Queen will want to keep in touch. Jaime exhaled, kneeling in front of his brother and drawing him into a hug as well. Goodbye for now. Yes, for now, safe travels. With the last of their goodbyes done, they set out along the Gold Road with the remaining Lannister soldiers in the capital. It felt strange leaving King's Landing behind. It had been Arya's home for the last 7 years. Every time she left she knew she would eventually return, and while she knew that this would not be the last time she saw the Red Keep, this felt much more permanent. Are you all right? Jaime asked, nudging his horse up beside hers. Arya nodded absently. Yes, I am. It's strange, I know, going back to Casterly Rock for good, Jaime said. I think I spent longer in this place than the West. So have I, Arya said. She tore her eyes away from the great city, but I'm looking forward to a change of scenery. Then, without another word, she nudged her horse into a gallop, away from the keep which held so many memories, both wonderful and terrible, and toward the west, toward Casterly Rock. It was not a place made for a wolf, but she had spent long enough amongst lions that she knew how to play their games. She would manage. Chapter 108, Epilogue. The snow had started to melt. It had been 5 years since the end of the long night, 5 years of a hard, cold winter, but all things considered, those years were not as bad as the Citadel had suspected. It would have been longer, they claimed, if the dead had not been defeated at Harrenhal, but for their efforts, the living were granted a bit less suffering. It was good to see the grass making itself known again, little spots of green, popping up through the whitehand, watching the rivers run clear. Arya was even glad to see the mud on the banks of the God's Eye. The ground was no longer frozen and would soon be able to take a new harvest. The God's Eye itself had not been frozen since that day 5 years ago when Arya plunged a knife into the Night King's once beating heart. The children of the forest remained on the Isle of Faces, though their numbers were fewer, and their magic kept the water flowing. And Bran was there too. She had seen him only in wolf dreams, a face in a great tree that resembled her brother. She did not know if he was living or dead or something in between. She had waited too long to find out. So long as they were headed north, she knew that she had to go to him. She crossed the lake alone in a small rowboat, slowly and steadily, knowing the island might turn her back but hoping that it wouldn't. Every once and a while she stopped to glance across the water. Harrenhal stood out against the blue sky, a blasted ruin, the site of the battle of the long night. The site of where it all began for her. She had thought about going there too, walking about the flow stone yard, climbing what remained of the towers, finding that little room where she once played cupbearer, but she had decided against it. That time was long past now, and there were some ghosts she did not yet want to face. The ghosts on the Isle of Faces would be difficult enough. The island did not push her back. In fact, the lake did not even stir as she crossed, and before she knew it, her little boat had slid up onto the shore, wedging itself between 2 large roots. Arya hopped out onto the bank, feeling a rush of memories come over her. It was colder the last time she was here, and there were fewer trees. Now the grove was so plentiful the trunks seemed to form a solid wall in places, and they all had faces and eyes that watched her as she made her way up the hill. The shadows had eyes as well, the children of the forest spying on her from the gaps between the trees. She did not trouble them, and she was careful to keep her hands out and extended so that they could see she was unarmed, though she was sure they knew she was not a threat. They had all seen her kill the Night King with the very dagger which rested at her hip. To her right, one of the shadows stirred, and Arya turned to see a familiar face loping out of the woods. She smiled, dropping to her knees as her wolf nudged her huge head into her hands. "Hey girl," she murmured, "did I leave you here too long? Did you have enough to eat?" She stroked a hand through Nymeria's fur. "I'm sorry, I should have come back for you earlier, shouldn't I? Forgive me." Nymeria nudged her face with her nose. She seemed healthy, strong. Her time with the children had clearly not weakened her. Arya just hoped she hadn't mistaken any of them as prey. Arya straightened again. "Come on, will you see him with me?" Nymeria let out a low whine and trotted ahead of Arya up the hill. She followed, trying to ignore a growing ache in her chest and the burn on the skin of her throat, which throbbed with the memory of her last battle here. At last they reached the top of the hill, and Arya found herself looking up at the most splendid weirwood tree she had ever seen. Its trunk was thicker than it should have been, considering it had only been growing 5 years, and its branches formed a canopy above the others, practically blotting out the sun with its red leaves. And at the centre of the tree she saw her brother's face. He seemed almost carved from wood, for his skin was as pale as the bark. His eyes were rolled back into his head, and there was a red mark where his heart once beat, still dripping down the trunk even 5 years later. Arya shuddered at the sight of him, pushing down her tears. She knelt in front of him. "It's been a while," she murmured. "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. I came in the wolf dreams, I suppose, but that doesn't really count." She swallowed hard. "What you did, Bran, everything you sacrificed, I hope you can see that it was worth it. The 7 kingdoms are recovering, but they're at peace for now. I hope they will stay that way. 5 years without war has been a welcome change of pace." She looked up at him. "I wish I had your sight sometimes, so I could see what's coming. I wish I could peer into the future and know exactly what I need to do. But more than that, I wish I had you. I wish I had been faster." He did not respond. She had not expected him to, but even so the silence hurt. Above her a raven cawed as she stood, stepping forward. She rested a hand over the red spot on Bran's heart. Then suddenly, falling, she was falling but not to the ground. Her mind seemed to tumble backward into blank space, and for a long moment Arya had nothing to hold on to. No solid ground. She was plunging down, down, down. Until she wasn't. She opened her eyes and found herself standing in front of Bran again. Only this time Bran was not wrapped up in the tree. He was standing beside it, standing on his own 2 feet, resting a hand against the bark. It was not real, Arya knew. She had only to look around at the woods, which seemed to glow with a strange, pale green light. It was peaceful here and the air smelled sweet, but seeing Bran standing in front of her, smiling like he once did, made her weak in the knees. Bran, she took a step toward him. This is an illusion. Yes, an illusion or a dream. Bran looked up from his tree. Do you have dreams, Arya? Every night, she said. Strange ones. Sometimes, she said, but that's to be expected after everything I've seen. Perhaps, he said, you should listen to your dreams when you can. Sometimes they do have meaning, but you will have to decide which ones are real. Do you still dream? Arya asked. In your tree, do you still see the past, present and future? I see the past laid out like a very long story carved into stone. Bran circled around the trunk, letting his fingers drag across the wood. There was a gap in the tree, almost like a seat, as if Bran had stepped right out of the wood to greet her. And I see the present, so many moments happening right now, but the future is covered in shadows. That doesn't sound promising, Arya asked. It may not be good or bad, Bran said. It's been like this ever since I died. Perhaps the future is only meant for the living, though I find that the Red Priests obscure my vision of the present from time to time. Arya's brow furrowed. She knew about the Red Priests. More and more of them had come flocking to Westeros since Daenerys was crowned, declaring her to be Azor Ahai, the one who would light the way and purge the non-believers in a sea of flame. The Queen was grateful for their loyalty, but she had no intention to set aside the faith of the Seven. That would lose her a great deal of support after all. Why would the Red Priests obscure your vision? Arya asked. The old gods and the Red God are very different. Theirs is a magic of fire. The old gods are of earth and water and winter, Bran said. They rarely work in tandem. It was a rare thing. When you and Jon rose from the dead, you kept a hold of yourselves. That is not usually what happens to those raised by the Red God. No, Arya remembered Beric telling her as much. When one was raised by the Lord of Light, they were different from before, left to ceaselessly pursue the task for which they had died. In many ways it was a shell of their former existence. Jon and Arya had escaped that, but only because of their wolves. The idea of the Red Priests obscuring Bran's vision was concerning for more than one reason. It was after the arrival of one priestess from Volantis that Queen Daenerys bore a child, which was strange, because one of Varys' little birds had told Arya that Daenerys was infertile. Was it possible that the Lord of Light had given her a miracle as well, the miracle to produce life again? Perhaps, Bran said, reading her thoughts. I cannot say for sure, but magic that can raise one from the dead can do many things. It's a question of whether those things are good for Westeros, I suppose, Arya said. That is up to you to sort out. The future belongs to you now. Bran sighed, coming to stop in front of the tree again, in front of his empty seat. Even though you see me now, don't mistake me for one of the living, Arya. I'm something else now. I know, she murmured, but at least I could speak with you. I wish I could speak with the other dead. Bran gave her a soft smile. Take care of our family, make sure that they do not join me, and be prepared. Arya opened her mouth to reply, but before she could, she was falling again, tumbling through empty space away from her brother. She reached out, wanting so desperately to grasp his hand, but her fingers only drifted through icy mist. Her eyes snapped open and she found herself lying on her back in front of Bran's tree, her hand outstretched toward the sky. Tears trailed from her eyes and she slowly lowered her hand to wipe them away. A nose nudged her other hand, and she became aware of Nymeria lying beside her, her tail wagging lazily back and forth. I'm all right, girl. Arya slowly sat up, looking up at Bran's tree. It was tempting to try to go back to him, but she knew better than that. He would not want her to linger with him in that strange grove of trees. She stood, brushing herself off, forcing herself to turn away from the great tree and look down at her wolf. All right, ready to go. The small Lannister caravan had found a place not far from Harrenhal to set their tents while Arya attended to business. It did not take her long to rejoin them. Her horse was a bit spooked by Nymeria, but she was able to calm the beast with a few whispered words. She's a friend to you, Arya murmured, My friends are her friends, don't worry. The caravan came into sight and Arya spotted Jaime at the far end of the camp, sitting outside of the largest tent. Two smaller shapes stood in front of him, a 2-year-old boy helping a 1-year-old girl to walk. They all looked up when Arya approached, and the boy beamed and laughed as she leapt off her horse. For a moment he looked like he might run to her, but then he remembered he was still holding onto his sister's hand and carefully lowered her to the ground before hurrying over. Mama, I told you I wouldn't be gone long. She caught him up in her arms. He was at the age where she was no longer terrified to hold him. Barbies seemed so fragile, but after a few years they seemed to take more of a human shape. Tybalt was past his 2nd year, golden-haired and green-eyed and lanky for his age. A Lannister child through and through, which had pleased the lords of the West. It was fitting to follow that Lannister namming custom for him, and Tybalt seemed to suit him. Elissa had more of the north in her, dark brown hair with a shade of Tully auburn when the sunlight hit it right, and clear grey eyes. She could only take a few steps at a time and say a few words, but she was healthy and strong. Namming them had been the hardest thing, for names had so much weight in Westeros. Arya had thought of namming them for those she had lost. Of course she had. Her brother had done the same with his children, but Arya did not want to curse her children with the names of the dead when they were still living. She feared dooming them to the same fate when they grew up. Better to pick the names of strangers from far back in history and give them a chance to make their own mark. She had thought of namming Tybalt something else when he was born, but that name would have been a terrible burden for any Lannister child. Dog, Elissa said, pointing forward. Arya turned to see Nymeria loping forward, her eyes curious. It's a wolf, Elissa. Arya went over to her, kneeling down and setting Tybalt on the ground. This is Nymeria. Tybalt looked wide-eyed from Arya to the wolf, gripping hard onto her sleeve. He was uncertain of such a large creature with so many teeth. It's all right, Arya said, beckoning Nymeria closer. You can touch her. Tybalt hesitated and Arya grasped his little wrist in hers, helping him to reach out and rest a hand against Nymeria's coat. His eyes widened at her softness and he began carefully stroking her shoulder all on his own. Nymeria lay down in front of him, resting her large head against the ground, and he beamed, beckoning for Elissa to join him. She did, crawling quickly across the ground to pet what she believed to be a very large dog. There was no fear in her at all. You found her then, Jaime said, approaching. Yes, Arya straightened. I should have gone back for her years ago. I was just worried, I know. Jaime wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Did you go to Harrenhal as well? Arya shook her head. No, it doesn't feel like the right time. He didn't press her on that, so business here is done. Almost, she said. I still have to find the Brotherhood, but they're close. Can you manage the children for a little longer? That's why we have scepters, to make sure I don't lose any of them. He grinned. Go on, we'll be waiting. Going again, Tybalt called out from where he sat beside Nymeria. She had rolled onto her back, like the terribly fearsome predator that she was. Not for long, Ty, Arya said. Nymeria will look out for you while I'm gone. Do you trust them with the wolf more than me? Jaime asked. Arya smirked. She does have an awful lot of teeth to defend them against attackers. And an awful lot of teeth to eat them if she gets hungry. She gave him a small shove. You can work together then, so long as no one dies while I'm away. Yes, my lady, I guarantee no one will die. He gave her a small bow. She smiled and returned to her horse. Truth be told, Jaime was a very good father. He never really got the chance to be a parent to his first 3 children. It would have been too dangerous for him to be present in their lives. Someone could have found out his terrible secret. But this time he could claim the children as his own, and he loved them dearly. He had actually been better than Arya at holding the children when they were Barbies. She was afraid to drop them every time the scepters passed them into her arms. Jaime, even with one hand, had no trouble at all. The idea of parenthood had rather terrified Arya for a long while. She did not trust herself to be a good mother. She worried about being around too much or too little. She worried about hurting them. She worried about them hatting her one day. And those fears had not gone away, but the joys were beginning to outweigh them. The Brotherhood operated out of many villages scattered throughout the Riverlands and spent most of their time these days helping the small folk recover from the many wars they had suffered. Arya always came to one particular village when she passed through the Riverlands with a small sack of money to help with their efforts. She felt honour bound to assist them. If not for their old leader Beric, she would not be alive. and he had wanted the Riverlands to be safe again. The Lannister family had done its part in destroying the Riverlands. Arya intended to make things right. The small folk stared when she rode into town, and some of them retreated into their homes, but one familiar face did not balk at the sight of her. Lady Lannister, Gendry stepped out of his forge, returning his hammer to his belt. The burns he had suffered during the battle in Harrenhal were still evident on one side of his face and neck, but they had healed as well as they could. We weren't expecting you for another few days. We made good time. Arya swung off of her horse. You look well, how are things? The Riverlands are doing well enough. We're relieved that winter is coming to a close, Gendry said. A few more of the Brotherhood drifted out of the shadows to flank Gendry, but they did not go for their weapons. They knew Arya was not a threat. That's good news for everyone. Arya passed a bag of gold to Gendry. Here, put it to good use. Thank you, lady, he said. We always do. You don't have to call me lady, Gendry, Arya said. You're the Lady of Casterly Rock, he said. I absolutely do. Yes, but you're also an old friend, Arya said. You get some privileges. Then I consider it a privilege to continue to annoy you without repercussion, lady, Gendry said. Careful, Gendry, one of the other Brotherhood laughed. She'll take your fingers. With the same blade she used to kill the Night King, Gendry raised an eyebrow. I would consider it an honor. Arya sighed, but a small smile crossed her lips. It seemed her reputation was becoming known in the Riverlands as well. She hadn't really meant for it to become a reputation. The first time, she took 2 fingers from one of Lord Serret's nephews for thievery. She later did the same to a young lord who chose to comment on her and James' lack of fingers at court. Not even 3 hands between you, and you expect us to bow quietly. He had been protesting Arya's choice to call in the debts of his family, which they had been cleverly hiding from the newly established Lord and Lady of Westeros, thinking that they would let them get away with it. She severed 2 fingers from his left hand in front of the court. Her father-in-law had told her to strike fast and hard after all, and that moment had made an impression. There, now we have enough fingers for 3 hands, and if you don't pay your debts, my lord, I'll take your good hand. Then my husband and I will have a full set. Suddenly that had become her calling card. For lords who tried to undermine her or go behind her back or plot to turn Jaime against her, she took 2 fingers as a warning. They had 1 chance. On the second she would not just take fingers. It served 2 purposes, of course. It cemented her reputation as a strong leader in the West, and it was something of a black mark on those lords who had tried to challenge her. Anyone could see their treachery. They had merely to look at their 3-fingered hands. And yet the punishment was still far more merciful than her predecessor would have given for some of their slights. She had not drowned any families in their halls. She hadn't even executed some of the lords for offences that would have earned them an execution 5 years ago. But the threat that she might, that kept them all in line. I won't be taking any fingers today, Arya said. You aren't my bannermen at any rate. You have sworn me no oath of loyalty. Good news then, Gendry said. Lady Lannister. Arya turned to see a girl riding up on a horse. It took her a moment, but she recognised her face. Mary, the girl from the family nearly robbed by Lord Serret's nephew. Mother said she saw you passing through and I had to see for myself. The girl swung off the horse. I'm sorry, forgive me, she curtsied quickly. You probably don't remember. Mary, yes, Arya asked. I remember. That horse is the one we gave to your family, isn't it? Yes, she rides very well. Mary stroked her muzzle. She looked absolutely delighted that Arya had remembered her name. Though, Mother says it's only right that I return her if you wish her back, to pay the debt. Arya smiled. That's kind of you to offer, but I already have a horse and I wouldn't take her from you. It seems you're taking good care of her. She's yours to keep. There is no debt, Mary. The girl beamed, dipping into another hasty curtsy. Thank you, lady. I'll keep taking care of her as long as I can. See that you do. Arya swung back onto her horse, glancing back to Gendry. I'll see you again, I'm sure. Until then, take care of yourself. Aye, you too, lady, Gendry said with a nod. Arya made it back to their little caravan by sundown. The scepter had already put the children asleep in their tent, and Jaime was sitting outside on a large rock, watching the horizon. He looked up when she swung off of her horse and tied her to the post with the others. Did everything go well? Terribly, Arya said. I was set upon by bandits. Those poor bandits, Jaime said with a grin. Was that Gendry boy among them? The Brotherhood, I mean, not the bandits. Depending on who you ask, the Brotherhood are bandits, Arya said. And yes, Gendry was, but I'm not sure he's young enough to be called a boy, Jaime. He's younger than me, Jaime said. He was pretending to be uninterested, but she could hear the slightly strained note in his voice. And how was it seeing your old friend? Wonderful, Arya said flatly. He confessed his undying love for me. I'm going to run away with him and live in the woods. Jaime gave her a look, reaching up to grasp her wrist and pull her down to him. Not if I stop you. She landed in his lap, already laughing. Best of luck with that. I'm the hero of Harrenhal and I have exactly 3 more fingers than you. Details, he said, leaning down to kiss her. She let him, running her crippled hand through his blonde hair. The kiss lingered for a long moment, and when he pulled back, she sighed. All right, fine, I'll stay, I suppose. Jaime grinned, glad to hear it. She shifted to sit beside him on the rock. Did you know my 2 fingers reputation has spread to the Riverlands now? Of course it has, Arya, Jaime said. You're the Lady of Casterly Rock and you killed the Night King. Every rumour about you is going to spread. I suppose. Apparently it's an honour to have fingers removed by me because I killed the Night King. That's a nice touch. You should tell that to any uncooperative bannermen. I should, shouldn't I? Arya shrugged. Of course they wouldn't be around to tell if someone else was in charge. True enough, Jaime said. I'm not arguing with your methods. They are efficient. I still remember when some of the lords started coming to me in private, hoping that I was the easy one between the 2 of us. I remember that too, Arya said, and then they discovered we're both the hard one. That we are, Jaime circled an arm around her shoulder and she rested slightly against him. And, what about the Isle of Faces? How did things go there, good or bad? I'm not sure, Arya said. A bit of both, I suppose. Did you find Bran? Jaime asked. Yes, he spoke to me, Arya said. He's not alive, he's something else now, trapped in that tree, but I had a vision of him, almost like a dream. And what did he tell you? Jaime asked. He was unfazed by the notion of her having visions. She could walk into the mind of her wolf and her brother had practically ascended to godhood. Visions were almost normal. Is the future dark and full of terrors as some of those red priests say? He doesn't know, Arya said. He said the future is obscured from him, covered in shadow, so I suppose it is dark and full of terrors then. Jaime's brow furrowed. Does he know why? He has a few theories, Arya said. Red god magic and old god magic don't mix, or it could be that he can only see what has happened, now that he's not fully alive. The fact that he doesn't know makes me nervous, Jaime said. Me too, but we'll be prepared for whatever it is, I'm sure, Arya said softly. They had to be. They had children now. It was one thing to face a burning world when one was alone, but she did not want a single flame to touch her son or her daughter or any other children she might have. She knew what it was to grow up in the midst of too many wars. It took another fortnight to reach Winterfell. The snow still lay thick around the castle, but the chill of the air was not quite so sharp. Arya felt her spirits lift, seeing the home of her childhood. She had made the rock her home over these past 5 years, but it would never be Winterfell. She knew that. Nymeria seemed just as happy to be home, and she let out a howl as she darted past their caravan. In the distance, Arya could see the other dire wolves circling the keep to meet her and welcome her back, a lost member of the pack they had never forgotten. Gods, they are huge, Jaime observed from his horse. If you bring your wolf back with us, the lords will be terrified of you. I don't need a wolf to make them terrified. A knife is enough, Arya sighed. Besides, I think Nymeria would be happier up here. And then at least one piece of me can remain north. When they entered through the gates, her nephews and her niece were upon her at once as soon as she swung off of her horse. It was Lyanna who plunged into Arya's arms and she picked her up and swung her around. Gods above, you're getting heavy. She glanced to her left to see that little Ned was nearly at her shoulder. And you're getting tall. How old are you? 9 years, little Ned said proudly. 7 hells, he's going to outgrow me soon, she thought. Lyanna and Ben were still small at least, but somehow she knew they would all grow taller than her if given time. She dreaded the day when her own children passed her by. She knew they would somehow. Most of the Lannisters were annoyingly tall, their father included. We want to meet our cousins, Lyanna crowed as Arya sat her down. Let us meet them, now. That was right, they hadn't gotten a chance to meet yet. The last time Arya had visited the north, Tybalt was not yet born. All right, Arya backed toward the carriage where the children were riding, leading her eager niece by the hand. Tybalt poked his head out between the curtains to look down. Lyanna, this is Tybalt. Very pleased to meet you, she stuck out a hand. I'm your cousin. Cousin, Tybalt repeated, trying out the word. He didn't seem to know what to do with her hand. You kiss it, silly, I'm a lady, Lyanna demanded. Tybalt seemed to take her word for it, bending to kiss her hand. Lyanna giggled and helped him climb out of the cart. Jaime meanwhile had taken Alyssa from one of the scepters, and Ned and Ben had crowded around him. What's her name, Uncle Jaime? Arya couldn't help but smile to hear him called that. Who would have guessed that a Stark would ever call a Lannister uncle? This is Alyssa, Jaime said. She's barely a year, so you must be gentle with her. Can I hold her? Ned asked. Yes, carefully, he warned as he slowly handed Alyssa over. She squirmed a bit in Ned's grasp, confused by his unfamiliar face, but then she seemed to decide that she didn't mind it and reached out to grasp his nose. Ned was delighted. They rushed you before you even time to breathe, Robb's voice came from behind Arya. Sorry about that. Arya smiled, turning and catching her brother up in a hug. They wanted to meet their cousins. She pulled back. You haven't met them yet either, have you? No, I'm afraid not. Hard to travel in the winter, Robb said. Well, come on then. Come and meet them. Arya looped her arm through his, gidding him over. Where's Mother? She hasn't met Alyssa yet either. She's on her way. Got caught up dealing with an issue with supper, Robb said. He knelt down as he came upon her son, a smile on his face. This one is Tybalt. He's a Lannister if I ever saw one. Takes after his father, Arya said. Tybalt, this is Uncle Robb. Tybalt looked him up and down and thrust out his hand. Robb gave it a little shake in greeting. Pleased to meet you, Tybalt. Gods, he's grown, hasn't he? Their mother swept into the yard then. Last time I saw him he was a babe. Walking and talking now, Arya smiled, embracing her mother. It's good to see you. You too, I hope the roads weren't difficult. Catelyn pulled back to cradle her face in her hands. I've been hearing interesting stories about you. Arya's lips twitched into a smile. Some of them may be true, others not. You can clear them all up at supper, Catelyn stepped back. Let me see your girl, Arya. I've been waiting to meet her. Arya led her mother to where Ned and Ben were fawning over Alyssa, and Catelyn joined them, taking her granddaughter into her arms. She was their only living grandparent, and Arya was glad they could have at least one. It was such a strange scene to watch. Years ago, Arya had barely given thought to the idea of being a mother. How could she when she did not even know for sure if she would survive the winter? It was only after the long night was at its end that the Lannister legacy finally became the focus. But even then, she had wondered if she could manage it. Watching her children now in Winterfell, it made her feel warm enough to ignore the chill of the wind. I trust Sansa as well, Catelyn asked over supper. They had time to talk as adults while the servants watched the children for a while. I assume you have seen her more recently than I have. Yes, Arya said. Her daughters are well too. I can't believe little Cat has grown so much. Well, she could hardly stay little forever, Robb said. I still haven't met her second daughter. Willa, wasn't it? Sansa was intending to visit soon, but now it seems she's pregnant again. As if you can criticize, Jaime said, turning his spoon between his fingers. Aren't all your children quite close in age, Lord Stark? I was not criticizing, just stating a fact, Robb said, but he did not seem particularly irritated by Jaime's remark. Arya was glad to see her husband and brother got on much better than they used to. Jaime's gift to Robb 5 years ago had lowered some of the walls between them. Tybalt and Alyssa are rather close in age as well. Do you have any news for us, Arya? None yet, she said. 2 are a handful enough right now. Speaking of news, Catelyn said, did you receive a raven from Jon before you left? Yes, I did, Arya said, smiling a bit. It seems Margaery is also with child. Lovely that it worked out so well between them, Jaime commented. Yes, Robb said, glancing at Arya. No one could have possibly predicted it. Arya held up her hands defensively. All I did was point Jon out to Margaery, Robb. She did the rest. You can't blame me for that. He's not blaming you, I'm sure, Catelyn said, giving Robb a pointed look. It's a fine match for Jon. A fine match, but I wish I could have had him here in the north, Robb sighed. But I suppose Arya had other plans. You really should blame Margaery, or Jon for that matter, Arya said innocently. It was barely my plan. Jaime snickered quietly behind his hand before he continued eating. Their supper conversation strayed to many topics, from the recovery of the North and the Riverlands to the gold problem in the West. The newly discovered silver mines were certainly helping keep the Lannister coffers full, but Arya knew better than to rest on that discovery. These mines were not nearly as expansive as the gold mines of Casterly Rock had once been, and they would not last forever. She would need to look to other ways of expanding the Lannister fortunes outside of mining silver and collecting debt payments from the crown, but it was a start at least. When supper was done, Arya excused herself from the table. I think I'll visit the crypts. It's been too long since I have. Her mother nodded once with a soft smile. We'll wait for you here. Arya had not visited the crypts since the last time she was in Winterfell 3 years previously, before her children were born. It was harder to make the trip north in the middle of winter when one had small children who were not adapted to such cold. But the crypts were as she remembered, ancient and full of memories and ghosts. She walked along the path until she found her father's statue. The stone face had always bothered her. It did not look like him. Arya could not clearly remember what he looked like anymore, but she knew it wasn't this. If the sculptor had captured his likeness, perhaps more memories of him would return to her. Father, Arya said, it's been a while, forgive me, it's good to see you again. Well, not see, but as close as I can come to it. She rubbed her hands together. Things are peaceful now, more peaceful than they were, though that's not a real feat. Thus far, Queen Daenerys seems to be taking to her role. I know you fought to unseat her father, the Mad King. I hope she will be better. I'm not eager to fight another rebellion. The West kept me away for the past few years. Not just children, but a few minor rebellions. I managed to deal with them, the Cerrets in particular. Arya sighed. I'll spare you the details, but I think it worked out for the better. I'm not sure if I handled things how you would have, but I'm walking the line as best I can. I will try to continue, I hope. In spite of everything, you would be proud of me, father. She looked up at his statue, longing for an answer, but knowing she would never receive one. Still, it seemed to her that her father would be proud. She had not forgotten his teachings. She tried to deal fairly with most people, and whenever she passed a sentence she swung the sword, or the knife depending on the punishment, but his were not the only teachings she followed. I miss you, she murmured into the darkness, not just to her father. He was not the only one she missed after all. She missed Bran, she missed Rickon. She missed Tywin. The anniversary of his death had passed recently. She remembered visiting the crypts at Casterly Rock to speak to him. She did that quite a lot, actually. It made her feel guilty sometimes that she talked more to Tywin Lannister's ghost than her own father. But then, she supposed she couldn't help that the northern crypts were so far away. And she couldn't help that her memories of her father were more distant. Tears started to burn at her eyes, but she forced them down. We'll speak again. Now that the summer is here, it will be easier for me to visit you. She stepped back from his statue. I'm sorry. She didn't really know what she was apologizing for. Not visiting more often, forgetting, becoming a Lannister, all things that he wouldn't blame her for, but the apology felt necessary all the same. She paid her respects to the other dead, then returned to the surface. As she stepped out into the waning sunlight, the laughter of children reached her ears. 7-year-old Lyanna was running circles around Tybalt as he struggled to keep up, and little Ned, who had grown to a spindly 9-year-old, was sitting with Alyssa in his lap, while Ben told her the names of all the wolves that circled through the courtyard, scaring the Lannister horses. From above, her mother and brother watched them fondly alongside her husband. A great wave of nostalgia washed over Arya then. She remembered when she was a child playing in this very yard, and somehow she and her brother had survived to watch their own children play without a care in the world. Jaime caught her eye and gave her a smile. She smiled in return. They were happy, and Arya found that she was happy too, but she was not settled. She remembered once long ago in the halls of Harrenhal when Lord Tywin told her that the War of 5 Kings would be his last war, only to be flung headlong into a series of conflicts that nearly broke Westeros. She would never make the mistake of claiming any conflict as the last war. There was always another war, but at the very least, Arya was looking forward to the spring.